O Lord, forgive us the wicked. Forgive us who, being unconscious, profaned and buried in oblivion the shrines of our ancestors. Forgive us, as we are embittered and cruel people who do not remember their kingship. Let thine churches come to life. Let the links of times restore. Let souls of people be full of light and love. Let the candle of the Russian land glow.
Unfortunately, in the modern life, our attitude towards the Church is material and consumer. In most cases, we pray to God to improve our mundane life, giving us health and solving our everyday problems. Therefore, we pay our attention only to grappling with these issues, but not on our relationships with God, not on searching Christ in our life. While we were told, "But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." The period of post-revolutionary Bolshevism is the time of the judgment of God over Russia, when a man faced the question what his faith was. Each of us should answer this question without further persecutions. In just several years, Orthodox Russia became Soviet and atheistic. New Martyrs call us and the Church to contemplate. They testified that Soviet authorities were allowed by God for the sins of Russian people, and they understood that they were also responsible for the things that were happening. New Martyrs lived during the period when many everyday issues paled into insignificance, while the main issue was to be with Christ or not. They paid with their life for their faithfulness. But this question remains the most important for Christians in any period.
Now, from the human point of view, we are scared to think about the terrible period New Martyrs lived in. But the struggle with our own sin, weakness, faint-heartedness, and little faith has never ended. Don't we really need the help and prayers of those who remained loyal to Christ, even facing their death? The importance of New Martyrs for the Church in general is in the reconsideration of the priorities of Church life. During the years of persecution, the Church was deprived of many of its forms of activities: charity, preaching, book publishing. The life of the Church was concentrated on its main sacrament, the sacrament of Holy Communion. In connection with it, the necessity of more often receiving Holy Sacrament of Christ, the renewed understanding of Holy Communion itself as the reflection of the Church in its power, holiness, and fullness was understood, as well as the thing that by taking part in it, Christians fulfill the commandments that were given. That is why divine liturgies were served both in labor camps and prisons, as well as in the houses of the faithful, even despite persecutions.
Someone can say that people are prevented to accept the holiness of the feet of New Martyrs, as there is some kind of a stereotype of holiness, because for the Russian, a saint is a unique person who lives in a completely different way than we do, while New Martyrs were so alike to us. The road of life, almost of every of them, was an ordinary life of a Russian priest to a truly faithful those years. He lived, serving and growing up his children, but facing death, he did not deny Christ, did not betray people or the Church of Christ. There are many such examples, as the majority of the canonized new martyrs are ordinary village priests who were loyal to their vows that they took when they were given the body of Christ and said, "Accept the pledge and keep it safe and sound until your utmost breath. As for it, you will be excruciated during the second and secret advent of Jesus Christ, our God and Savior."
And they fulfilled this commandment despite having the same difficulties as we do. They knew that their families could suffer. Some of the relatives asked the priest to leave the priesthood, otherwise they would be killed. But he answered, "I could not do it." However, these saints in most cases remain uncalled in the modern world, because we seem not to need the courage of faith and the determination in following Christ that they are able to give us. This is the tragedy of the modern society.
During our excursion, we visit 20 places of birth or service where 26 new martyrs and confessors of the land of Ruza, as well as 2 saints locally venerated, served. All of them suffered during the time of severe persecutions, and the hagiography of each of them is a true spiritual feat performed for the name of God, as a testimony of verity. We are at the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in Vasilievskaya village, where the last senior priest during Soviet period was new martyr Nikolai Vinogradov.
Holy Martyr Nikolai Vinogradov was born to the family of priest Mikhail Vinogradov on the 5th of April in 1876 in Dmitrov. It is known that his ancestors were clergy. He also followed their steps. After finishing ecclesiastical academy, he became a religious teacher of law of God. In 1898, Nikolai Mikhailovich married the daughter of priest Ivan Mitropolsky, Antonina. Wedding took place in the Church of Intercession on Varvarka. That year he became a deacon and served in Moscow Ascension Convent. In the family there were 6 children. In 1917, Nikolai Mikhailovich became a priest and began to serve at the Church of Holy Martyr Georgy. After the revolution, his family was deprived of livelihood. In 1918, after churches of the Radia were closed, priest Nikolai Vinogradov was transferred to the Church of Martyr Nikita on Chivaya Gora, where he served for nearly 18 years. By that time he was ordained an archpriest. The process of extermination of clergy and closure of churches went on. Despite appointments and closure of the Ascension Convent, Father Nikolai did not stop caring about nuns of the monastery. In the petition of Mother Superior of the convent, Abbess Evgenia, to Patriarch Tikhon it was written, "I beg to your holiness not to refuse to meet my expectation about the awarding of priest Nikolai Vinogradov with the cross." For his zealous service for the last 25 years, he did not stop caring about me and the nuns of the monastery in hardships, and after our eviction from the convent, he shared all our woes of that hard time and continued to guide us. The resolution of Patriarch Tikhon was to award. The children of Father Nikolai and Mother Antonina grew up, and their flat became too small for several families. Priest Nikolai with his wife moved to a room in a bell tower under the bell turret. Nearly 1935, the authorities closed the Church of Great Martyr Nikita, and Father Nikolai had to move to a new place of service. The priest served at the Church of the Nativity of Christ in Izmailov for a short time, while the same year he was appointed to the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Vasilievskaya of Ruza district of Moscow region. As in the former priest's house there was a village council, Father Nikolai with his wife had to settle in an old broken-backed hut in the churchyard. During those hard years, parishioners did not leave the priest. People from Moscow, including nuns, visited him for a confession. In summer, priest's grandchildren lived in the village of Vasilievskaya. The elder Nikolai was called the granddad's tail, as he tried to follow the priest everywhere. The grandson helped Father Nikolai serving in the altar, gathered mushrooms in forests, often asked him different questions. One day Nikolai asked his grandfather how to act when you went past a church that already might be closed. if it was needed to bare head and to cross yourself. Father Nikolai answered, if you feel that people around understand and also cross themselves, you always should stop and cross yourself. But if you expect negative reaction and foul language from people around, do not lead them into any temptation. The priest often had to recite rites in nearby villages. Despite having sore feet that swelled, he never refused people's requests. One day, moving painfully to the village of Vasilievskaya, he met a man who said, "When you meet a pope, you will have no path." Father Nikolai began the talk without any insult. The man was confused and explained that he did not want to hurt the priest, as it was other people's statement. According to the reminiscences of Nikolai Nikolaevich Ushakov, the priest's grandson, acting that way was common for Father Nikolai when somebody said or did something bad. He liked to go to the graveyard and pray near the graves. Father Nikolai served liturgies very often. He had a loud voice, serving very attentively without any hurry. Usually there were very few people in the church, mainly elderly women. Sometimes girls from the nearby school came across. On holidays, people from far away came to the church. A small choir was organized. In 1936, aged 56, his wife Antonina Ivanovna died. During this period there was an active process of closure of churches, while people were forced to deny their beliefs. There were strong measures against Orthodox traditions and customs. In the last summer of his mundane life, the relatives of Archpriest Nikolai Vinogradov remembered him as a man of few words, concentrated and looking at all like from another world in a slightly aloof way. Not before the arrest of Father Nikolai, the head of the village council wrote to a local newspaper that the priest advisedly organized services at the church, distracting people from work, attracting children to church with sweets. According to the detention order, it was written that he gathered collective farmers near the church and was reading the Bible to them. On Easter in 1937, Father Nikolai reached the agreement with a boatman to ferry people over the Moscow River for free. Then the priest was accused in the disruption of anti-Easter evening of collective farmers. Priest Nikolai Vinogradov was arrested at night on the 24th of August in 1937, being accused in anti-Soviet agitation. Later his relatives managed to find out that priest Nikolai Vinogradov was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment without rights of correspondence. In his last cross procession, Father Nikolai went wearing a cassock, being ready for the destiny. According to the accusation, he denied his guilt. The measures taken during the questioning are not known. Despite the fact that according to the indictment the convicted was deprived the right of correspondence with his relatives, in December 1937 a letter from Father Nikolai was received. On a piece of paper it was written, "Good afternoon, my dear children. I am still alive. Are you alive, and where are you? I am working. If you can, send me some white dried crusts, sugar and salt. My address is the town of Ust-Vim, in KVD labor camp, the 3rd detached area, the village of Ust-Koyen, to convicted Nikolai Vinogradov. Postscriptum, let God your well-being." The children prepared a parcel and sent it to the written address. The parcel returned with the inscription, "The addressee is not registered," while instead of products in the parcel there were stones. On the 24th of December 1937 he was dead. Archpriest Nikolai passed away as a holy martyr in the NKVD labor camp in Komi Republic. He was the last prior priest of the Church of the Resurrection of Christ before its closure and devastation. On the 24th of October in 1996, Holy Martyr Nikolai was rehabilitated. Several years later, he was canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church. On the 24th of December, a celebration in honor of Saint Nikolai took place. Matins and Divine Liturgy were recited. The descendants of the saint also took part in the Mass. The cross of the saint with relics was brought by their relatives for worshipping. As the senior priest of the church, Igor Shemilov, said, "God allowed much for us to understand what destruction a person who denied God could reach. I have shown you many good works from the Father, For which of these do you stone me? The Pharisees were asked by Jesus Christ, later being executed by means of the most excruciating execution. So the holy martyr who served God gave his life for their faith. But indeed he gained the true life, the eternal one. This is the gospel path that Jesus Christ was talking about. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. We're at the Church of the Domitian of the Virgin Mary in Tuchkova, where holy martyrs Boris Nazarov, Nil Smirnov, and martyr Alexei Losev served.
Holy martyr Boris Nazarov was born in 1884 in the city of Moscow. His father, Nikolai Igorovich Nazarov, served as a notary. In 1902, Boris Nikolaevich graduated from the Third Moscow Gymnasium and entered Moscow University, where he studied for 2 years in the mathematics department, and in 1907 passed the exam in theological subject at Moscow Theological Seminary. In 1908, Boris Nikolaevich was ordained as a priest to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady on the Sign in the village of Ilinskoye in Kolomensky country of Moscow province. In 1910, Father Boris began to serve at the Transfiguration Church in the village of Krykovo, and in 1924, the priest was transferred to the Assumption Church in the village of Katino of Ruza district. Over the years of service at this church, Father Boris was awarded with the Pectoral Cross in 1928, and in 1931 he was ordained an archpriest. The last place of service of Archpriest Boris Nazarov was the Church of St. Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Protasyevo of Vereya district of Moscow region, where he was appointed to serve in 1931. On the 25th of January in 1938, authorities arrested Father Boris and imprisoned him in Mozhaisk, and then he was transferred to Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the 26th of January, he was questioned. Father Boris categorically rejected all the charges. During the interrogation, the false witness testified that Archpriest Boris Nazarov was opposed to the Soviet authority, which was often expressed during conversations. In particular, as if he was saying about the situation in the country. A difficult time is coming. We must act in some way as they are fighting with religion, so we must first pay attention to the church. Soviet power is a dark power that must be fought, and collective arms are the seal of the Antichrist. They will not lead to the improvement of life. Look, what a mess around. They take and take our brother. Of course, it will not end well. Peasants will be outgraded, since they are also being arrested so much, regardless of anything, neither with their family, nor with the age of the arrested. The constitution gives freedom, but in reality there is some kind of heady grudging of the authorities. They want to show the people one thing, but in reality there is another. You see, after kulaks and us, they will take over the collective armies in order to create some incomprehensible terror with their actions. On the 2nd of February in 1938, being accused in counter-revolutionary slanderous propaganda of a rebel character, according to the Article 58, Clause 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Boris to death penalty. Archpriest Boris Nazarov was shot on the 17th of February in 1938 at the Butovo firing range ground near Moscow, and was buried in the common unknown grave. In 2002, Archpriest Boris Nazarov was canonized by the Holy Synod as a new martyr of Russia for general church veneration. Holy martyr Nil Smirnov was born on the 5th of November in 1881 in the village of Пересыпкино, Kirsanovsky country of Tambov province, in the family of a public school teacher and the priest's daughter. After graduating from the Kirsanovsk Town College from 1897 to 1921, Nil Mikhailovich worked on the railroad as a clerk of a goods office, an assistant of a cashier, an assistant of a ticket teller, a ticket cashier, a telegraph operator, and a manager of the economic part of the Yubileyny settlement of workers and employees of the Moscow Kazan Railway. In 1921, Nil Mikhailovich filed a petition for ordination and his admission to the clergy of Moscow. On the 8th of October in 1921, Nil Mikhailovich was ordained a deacon to the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in Sokolniki, and 2 weeks later, on the 22nd of October in 1921, he was ordained a priest to the Church of St. Chilnus Kira and John at the Serbian compound in Moscow. In November in 1921, Patriarch Tikhon Milavin approved Father Nil as a full-time priest of the Resurrection Church in Sokolniki. In August in 1923, the priest was transferred to the Church of the Assumption of the Mother of God at the churchyard of Katina of Mozhaisk district. And in November in 1925, he was again appointed to the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in Sokolniki. In 1930, he began to serve as a prior, and a year later he was approved in this position. In 1931, Father Nil was ordained an archpriest. In a denunciation to Father Nil in 1932, it was reported that the priest always speaks incendiary sermons. He is highly respected by believers of the dark masses of workers and former people, traders. On the 17th of February in 1933, Archpriest Nil was arrested on charges of anti-Soviet agitation and imprisoned in Butyrka prison. On the 23rd of February, while testifying to the investigator, Father Nil said, "I took the priesthood at the time when the fight against unbelief took on a fierce form, when the believers began to leave the church intensely, and I, seeing such a tide of the people from faith, decided to devote my life to the church and become a church leader. In my sermons delivered in the church, I tried to urge believers to observe moral rules. All these sermons called for the fight against unbelief and atheism. I will not plead guilty." On the 22nd of March in 1933, he was sentenced to a 3-year sentence to the Northern Territory by a special meeting of the USPA board. He served his punishment in Kagapol, worked on unloading the forest from rafts, stacked it in stacks, and on serving firewood. Upon returning from exile in 1936, he was appointed to serve at the Epiphany Church in the village of Buygorod of Volokholamsk district of Moscow region. In May in 1937, at the invitation of the priest Boris Nedumov, Father Nil began to serve at the Church of John the Baptist in the village of Ivanovo on Lama of Latoshino district. The prosecutor of Latoshino district, already in April in 1937, sent 2 letters to the head of the local NKVD department, in which he outlined the counter-revolutionary actions of the priest and ordered an investigation. In one of the letters it is written that a priest, without mentioning who exactly, of the church at Afanasyevo gathers pupils to his place and makes them read prayers, giving money for it to some of them. In the other letter, the facts of counter-revolutionary activity of priests, Boris Nedumov and Nil Smirnov, were described. Living in the village for 1 month and a half, the priests took some measures to boost religious agitation. Both had a pump organ, an accordion and a fiddle, and used them to organize parties. During the parties, besides playing music, they discussed how to boost religious spirit. In March, arranging for daughter Ekaterina to go to school in the village of Buygorod, Father Nil talked with the school director, telling her that his daughter is a believer, goes to church and wears a cross. Therefore, any anti-religious work carried out in the school should not concern her, and there is no need to force her to join the pioneer detachment. After the arrest of Father Nil in 1937, the school director was involved as a witness, and recalling this conversation showed the investigator. Carrying the cross openly with his daughter has an effect on the rest of the students. In this case, many students began to attend church. In addition, in April, a friend of the priest's daughter was found gospel in the class. In August 1937, Father Nil went to the diocesan administration with a request to appoint him to the village of Nizhny Vasilievskaya of Latoshino district, but even before the decision was made, he was arrested and interrogated on the 20th of August in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. During Easter liturgy in 1937, you declared to the faithful that, according to the new law, now the Church no longer belongs to the state and the Soviet government has no right to touch it. Do you accept this? Yes, it's true. Living on the territory of Latoshino district, you held counter-revolutionary agitation among the population. Do you accept this? In my work, I see no counter-revolutionary actions. It is true that I preach from the church chamber very often. Speaking about attracting young people to church, I said that it's pleasant to see many children at the church. I have promised them the help of God, and if they accept it, their life will be fine. Speaking about anti-religious work at school, I told the director not to force people with their anti-religious agitation. On the 22nd of September, Archpriest Nils Smirnov was questioned for the last time in Taganka prison, but he didn't plead guilty. At that, the interrogations were completed. On the 9th of October in 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Archpriest Nils Smirnov was sent to Bamla on the Amur region, where he died on the 2nd of October in 1938, in a labor camp at Izvestkova station in the Jewish Autonomous Region, and was buried in an unknown grave. On the 30th of July in 2003, by the Holy Synod, Archpriest Nils Smirnov was canonized as a new Martyr and Confessor of Russia for general church veneration.
We are near the ruins of the Church of Alexander Nevsky in the village of Abakumova, where Holy Martyr Nikolai Archangelski served.
Holy Martyr Nikolai was born on the 7th of November 1878 in the town of Vereya of Moscow province to the family of priest Alexander Nikolaevich Arkhangelsky. In 1893 Nikolai Alexandrovich finished the spiritual college of Pererva, while in 1899 he graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary and was appointed a teacher to a parish school. Nikolai Alexandrovich married and in 1915 was ordained a priest to the Church of Saint Alexander Nevsky in the village of Abakumova of Ruza County of Moscow Province. There the priest faced the revolution. In 1918, Father Nikolai was appointed to the Church of Michael the Archangel in the village of Konstantinova of Bronetsky County. After the revolution, the wooden church in Konstantinova had the same fate as thousands of Orthodox churches, being closed in 1920s and then being completely destroyed in 1940s. After the closure of the Church of Michael the Archangel, Father Nikolai served at different churches of Moscow diocese. In January 1930, the authorities arrested the priest, accusing him in counter-revolutionary activity, but they failed to plead him guilty and let him free in a month. In 1931, the priest was ordained an archpriest. For some time, Archpriest Nikolai served at the Church of the Dormition of Virgin Mary in the village of Konstantinova of Voskresensk district of Moscow region, until the church was closed in 1934. There he became the last prior of the church in the Soviet time. In 1934, Archpriest Nikolai Arkhangelsky was appointed to the Church of the Life-Giving Trinity in the village of Chizhi of Pavloposad district of Moscow region. On the 6th of October 1937, being accused in anti-Soviet counter-revolutionary agitation, the priest was arrested and imprisoned in Noginsk. During the investigation, we got the information that revealed you guilty in systematic anti-Soviet agitation. Do you accept this? Asked the investigator. I have not organized any anti-Soviet activity. I do not accept my guilt, answered the priest. Speaking about taxes, you complained that Soviet authorities want to impoverish you. Also, you expressed the opinion that soon Soviet authorities would end. Do you confirm these words? Asked the investigator. Speaking about taxes, I had a conversation, but I said that it was difficult for me to pay it. I do not remember the person I talked with, but I did not express the opinion about the soon fall of the Soviet authorities. This fact I do not accept, and I do not accept my guilt. This was the end of the interrogation. On the 3rd of November 1937, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region sentenced Father Nikolai to death penalty. On the 5th of November 1937, Archpriest Nikolai Arkhangelsky was executed on Butova firing range area near Moscow and buried in an unmarked mass grave. On the 16th of January 1989, the priest was rehabilitated by the Prosecutor's Office of Moscow region. In August 2000, Holy Martyr Nikolai Arkhangelsky was canonized by Archbishop's Council of the Russian Orthodox Church as a Holy Martyr and Confessor of Russia.
Holy Martyr Vasily was born on the 7th of May 1889 in the village of Zhokhovo of Podolsk County of Moscow Province to the family of the prior of the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of Smolensk, priest Alexander Nikolaev Arkhangelsky, and his wife Alexandra Mikhailovna. In 1908, Vasily Alexandrovich finished a two-class college in the village of Chashnikovo of Moscow Province and began to teach at a school at the Church of the Intercession of Virgin Mary in the village of Myshetskaya of Moscow County of the same province, while 2 years later he was appointed a teacher at a school at the village of Petrisheva of Veria County. On the 22nd of November 1913, Vasily Alexandrovich married Maria, the daughter of Deacon Peter Nikolsky, and was ordained a deacon to the Church of Elijah the Prophet of the village of Sinkovo of Dmitrov County, replacing his father-in-law. In January 1919, Deacon Vasily was mobilized to the Red Army and was sent on defensive works near the town of Serpukhov. Upon his return in 1920, Father Vasily was ordained a priest to the Church of Elijah the Prophet, while in 1926, priest Vasily Arkhangelsky was appointed to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady, the Joy of All Who Sorrow, in the village of Asaurova of Dmitrov district of Moscow region. Here, the priest served for the next 11 years. On the 27th of November 1937, priest Vasily Arkhangelsky was arrested during the mass persecutions of the Russian Orthodox Church. The same day, he was questioned. "We have information that you agitate in the anti-Soviet way," asked the investigator. "I do not agitate among the population in the anti-Soviet way," answered the priest. "Have you agitated among the population in the anti-Soviet way, appealing collective farmers to deny working in the kolkhoz? Give evidence." "I have not agitated among the population and have not appealed any collective farmers to deny working in the kolkhoz." "Do you accept the guilt in the indictment you have?" That was the last question of the investigator. "I did not plead guilty in the indictment I have, as I have not agitated among the population in the anti-Soviet way," answered the priest. On the 29th of November, the officer of the Inquiry Department of Dmitrov district questioned some witnesses. One of them, the secretary of a Saurova village school, said, "During the religious holidays, Arkhangelsky agitated among the population in the anti-Soviet way, appealing collective farmers to deny working in the kolkhoz and go to church instead." On this topic, during the harvesting in 1937, he said, "We, the Orthodox, must not change our religious interest on anything else, neither on our private nor kolkhoz, while we must venerate God and pray to Him." Arkhangelsky said about the income tax, "Soviet authorities have taxed both the faith of Christ and its clergymen so heavily. They want priests to stop serving at churches." On the topic of the elections to the Supreme Soviet, Arkhangelsky said, "We must not participate in the elections, even if Soviet authorities say that anyone may be elected. Indeed, there will be the same chairwarmers that are now, that are drinking the blood of people. Our business is just to listen to and to do what we are told without any politics." Already on the 29th of November, the investigation was over, and Father Vasily was transferred to Taganka prison in Moscow. On the 3rd of December 1937, the Inquiry Troika sentenced him to 10 years of imprisonment in a labor camp. Priest Vasily Arkhangelsky passed away on the 20th of January 1939 in custody in the Yekaterinburg region and was buried in an unmarked grave. On the 7th of May 2003, Priest Vasily Arkhangelsky was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
Holy Martyr Konstantin Nekrasov was born on the 15th of October 1872 in the town of Mazhaisk of Moscow region The family of psalmist Nikita Nekrasov. In 1887, Konstantin Nikitovich finished a spiritual college, while in 1893 he graduated from the Bethany Spiritual Seminary on the second category. In 1894 he began to work as both a teacher and a tutor at Moscow Imperial College of Duke Peter of Oldenburg. Upon his own request, Konstantin Nikitovich was appointed a teacher to Staroyamskaya parish school at the Church of Saints Florus and Lavros in the village of Stary Yam of Podolsk County, also serving as a psalmist and sexton. Konstantin Nikitovich married maiden Alexandra Petrovna, and in 1895 was ordained a priest to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign in the village of Znamenskaya Kholmy of Zvenigorod County, where he was a prior from the 20th of May 1895 to 1902. Serving at the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign, he also taught the law of God at primary school of the village of Sysoevo. In Kholmy in 1900 his older son Sergei was born. The wife of the priest, Alexandra Petrovna, worked as a teacher. On the 3rd of August 1902, Father Konstantin was transferred to the Church of St. Elia in the village of Ilinskaya Sloboda of Mazhaisk County by Metropolitan Vladimir of Moscow. Also, the priest was a teacher at parish and zemstvo schools, organized the Society of Soberness, and constantly agitated peasants to give up that addiction. In 1903, daughter Vera and son Vasily were born to the priest's family. In 1905, the priest was awarded with a waistcloth, while in 1908 with a skufia. Since 1910, the priest was a member of Dean Council, while from 1911 to 1915 was an assistant of Mazhaisk Rural Dean. On the 22nd of February 1910, son Konstantin was born to the priest's family. In 1913, priest Konstantin Nekrasov was awarded with a Kamilavka, while in 1915 with a pectoral cross. On the 3rd of December 1915, the priest was appointed a prior to the Cathedral of Nicholas the Miracle Maker of the town of Mazhaisk by Metropolitan Makarios. While serving at the cathedral, Father Konstantin was ordained an archpriest. In 1923, Archpriest Konstantin Nekrasov was arrested for the church activity and imprisoned in Taganka prison in Moscow. According to the 69th article of the Criminal Code of Russia, he was sentenced to 2 years of exile in the town of Berezov of Tobolsk province. Upon his return, Archpriest Konstantin began to serve at the Church of the Intercession of the Virgin Mary in the village of Alexina of Ruza district. The preachers of the priest were so convincing and made such a huge impact on collective farmers that the authorities considered the preachers as a threat for the Soviet regime. On the 9th of May 1930, one of the informers of OGPU reported to the officer that in the village of Alexina there was a strong group of clergy. As a result, the events of the Soviet authorities were hardly organized. The group consisted of 50-year-old Pope Konstantin Nekrasov, who returned from the exile for his anti-Soviet agitation and lived in the village of Alexina for 3 or 4 years, 40-year-old sexton Znamensky Semyon Ivanovich, 55-year-old Pope's widow Alexandra Ivanovna Rozanova, 40-year-old nun from Bordino Monastery of Mazhaisk Praskovia Romanovna Zhukova, who was of local origin, nun Anna Osipova from Dubrov Monastery, and 70-year-old church prayer pastor Semyon Dmitrievich Griznov, who was a prosperous farmer. On the 13th and 14th of August, the investigator questioned several locals of the village of Alexina, from those whose attitude towards the church was bad, starting from the head of the village council, who was questioned twice that day. During the interrogation, he stated that in the village of Alexina there was a clergy group that did all possible to stop all the events of the Soviet authorities by their activity and agitation. In November 1929, on one of the holidays, Pope Nekrasov urged the faithful to follow the religion and not to listen to the servants of Antichrist. During the collectivization, Nekrasov held legal meetings at his place. During one of them, he told people who had gathered that they had to enter the collective farming when they were made to do it, and they would have a ration and would be starving. A witness added that the collective farm that was hardly organized might be demolished because of the agitation of the clergy. Nekrasov was considered to be the priest who preached in a very heartwarming way. When the clergy was heavily taxed, Nekrasov said that Soviet authorities wanted to rob them. A teacher from Alexina school who was the secretary of a local league of atheists was questioned. She stated that Nekrasov often preached, and she was told that Nekrasov preached in a very heartwarming way. So, in July, Nekrasov preached about the passions of Christ, and then said, "People are suffering now as they are persecuted by the servants of Antichrist. People are heavily taxed, but one day the verity of Christ will exalt again, and the servants of Antichrist will be demolished." After such agitation in our village, the events of the Soviet authorities were held badly. A big group of peasants connected with Nekrasov always supported the clergy, as they were allowed to mow by the prosperous farmers who were under the influence of Pope Nekrasov. On the 20th of August 1930, the OGPU officers arrested Archpriest Konstantin Nekrasov and nun Paraskeva Zhukova, who were imprisoned in Ruza OGPU department prison. That day one more witness was questioned. The person said that in March Pope Nekrasov preached from the Umbo. "Orthodox people, the last times are coming. We are persecuted, and Christ was. We are mocked. Peasants are taxed and made to enter collective farms." The priest's answer was, "Being truly faithful, I accept that each kind of authority is from God. So agitating against it equals being against the will of God. I am honest and want only moral and spiritual peace. In my preachers, I always tried to teach people love and peace with the word of God. Is it a crime against the laws of the authorities and humanity? If some people slander me, I think there are those who will confirm my innocence. I do not mind being punished as a criminal, but as I am not guilty, there is no use to be imprisoned or exiled as a martyr. This is all that I can tell you about the accusation of counter-revolutionary activity." At the same time, he sent a protestation to the OGPU office where he wrote, "On the 23rd of August I was declared by OGPU officer Malkov that I was accused according to the 58th article, paragraph 10. After reading, I understood that the indictment is based on the evidence of people unknown to me, and all this is completely false. In order to make the true conclusion about this case, it is needed to check the evidence. So, I kindly ask you to question the people who always saw my actions and heard all of my words, the church clerks, the neighbors, and all the faithful of my parish. And after making sure that the indictment is wrong, the informers should be warned not to slander, but to report only real facts. Serving at Alexina parish only for 3 years, I did and said nothing against the Soviet authorities, while in the autumn of the past year I heard the conversation between local Komsomol party members who said that one priest was removed, and this one would be removed easily too. We need just to write a paper, and everyone will believe us. So someone wrote a paper. But I hope that the authorities won't be deceived and would make the right decision. I am ready to leave the position of the priest in Alexina without being innocently tortured. Upon my release, I will ask my diocese authorities to allow me to retire with the right of serving liturgy at one of the churches of Mozhaisk." On the 25th of September 1930, the OGPU Troika sentenced the priest to 3 years of exile in Kazakhstan, and he was exiled to Semipalatinsk. Being in the exile, he made friends with Archpriest Vladimir Proferantsov, whom he invited to live in Mozhaisk upon the release, as it was forbidden to live in Moscow for those who returned after an exile. When the term of the second exile ended, Father Konstantin moved to the town of Mozhaisk and was appointed to the Church of Saint Elijah the Prophet. In 7 years, on the 5th of December 1937, the priest was arrested once again and imprisoned in Mozhaisk prison. The same day, Peter Sokolov, the deacon of the Church of Saints Joachim and Anna, was questioned. "What do you know about the counter-revolutionary activity of Nekrasov?" "I haven't noticed any counter-revolutionary activity of Nekrasov, but I remember that Nekrasov organized the Society of Soberness and tried to distract peasants from alcohol and attract to church. After his exile for anti-Soviet agitation, Nekrasov did not leave the church, and is now serving as a priest of the Church of Saint Elijah the Prophet." The next day the indictment of the priest was composed. where it was written that the priest worked hard to organize an active church group, and for that aim he organized a choir from former nuns and active church members. During the search in Nekrasov's house, a leaflet with Comrade Stalin's photo got dirty in inks was found. That was refused by Nekrasov himself. The action confirms his hostile attitude towards Soviet authorities and party's chairman. On the 9th of September, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Konstantin to death penalty. Archpriest Konstantin Nekrasov was executed and buried in Butovo on the 15th of December 1937. Archpriest Konstantin Nekrasov was canonized in August 2000.
We are next to the Church of the Transfiguration in Krymskaya village, where Holy Martyr Nikolai Sokolov served.
Holy Martyr Nikolai was born on the 20th of March in 1877 in the village of Andreevskaya in Ruza County in Moscow province, in the family of Alexander Yefimovich Sokolov, who was appointed a sexton at the Church of St. Andrew Stratolates, instead of his father Yefim Sergeyevich, on the 19th of December 1867. In the big and friendly family of Alexander Yefimovich and his wife Natalia Vasilievna, Nikolai was the firstborn son. In 1898, Nikolai Sokolov graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary with the first rank and was appointed a teacher to the parish school of the village of Krymskaya in Virea County. At that time, Nikolai Alexandrovich married Ekaterina Ivanovna, the daughter of Ivan Nikolaevich Mitropolsky, who was the priest at the Church of Transfiguration of Christ in the village of Krymskaya. Father Nikolai Sokolov and his wife Ekaterina Ivanovna had 7 children. On the 2nd of September 1899, Nikolai Sokolov was ordained a priest to the Church of Transfiguration of Christ by Bishop Nestor of Dmitrov, the vicar of Moscow Diocese. Father Nikolai combined his pastoral care with educational activities. Since 1899, he was both the teacher of Law of God and the head teacher at the parish school of Krymskaya, also teaching the Law of God at Zemstvo school of the same village. Since 1902, Father Nikolai also taught the Law of God at Zemstvo schools in nearby villages. Since 1909 to 1915, he was a member of the Diocesan College Council of Ruza, being a member of the board of Zvenigrad Spiritual College in 1911. Priest Nikolai Sokolov was considered to be a good preacher, a diligent pastor, and a teacher of the Law of God. In 1909, for pastoral and educational work on enlightening people with the verity of Christ at parish at Zemstvo schools of Ruza County, Father Nikolai was awarded with a purple velvet scoffia. In 1915, his work was also praised, and Father Nikolai was awarded with a coif. In 1924, he was ordained an archpriest, while in 1931 was awarded with a mitra. In the 1930s, he was a rural dean of Virea and Mazhaisk districts. In 1930, the household of the priest was severely taxed, so that Father Nikolai couldn't pay. He had to sell some of his property. The same year, the priest was dispossessed. In 1931, Father Nikolai was arrested and after spending a month behind bars, was given freedom. On the 11th of October 1937, in the heat of the repressions on the Russian Orthodox Church, Archpriest Nikolai was arrested and imprisoned in Mazhaisk prison, then in Taganskaya prison in Moscow. On the 28th of October, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Nikolai to capital punishment. He was executed on the 21st of October 1937 and was entombed in the unknown Popo's grave on the Butovo firing range near Moscow. In 1940, the priest's wife, who knew nothing about the destiny of her husband, appealed to the NKVD to review the case. After the reviewing, the prosecutor's assistant made a conclusion that the decision of the Troika was made according to the material of the case. The sentence matches the crime, so the grievance cannot be settled. On the 7th of October in 2002, Archpriest Nikolai was canonized by the decree of Holy Synod as new Martyr and Confessor of Russia.
Holy Martyr Nikolai Kabranov was born on the 10th of May in 1893 in the village of Blagoveshchenye of the Rogobushsky county of Smolensk province in the family of deacon Jacob Kabranov. After graduating from Smolensk Spiritual Seminary, Nikolai entered the University of Warsaw to study law. In 1918, Nikolai Yakovlevich was in the Crimea, where he was a chorister in the Cathedral of Simferopol, and then served to the Bishop of Tavria as a subdeacon. In Simferopol in 1920, Nikolai Yakovlevich was ordained a deacon, and a year later was ordained a priest. When the army of Wrangel was retreating from the Crimea, Father Nikolai decided to stay in Russia and served in a church in one of the villages of Melitopol province. In 1922, the priest served in Novospassky monastery in Moscow, where his brother Eugen Kabranov was an abbot. From 1923 to 1925, Father Nikolai served at the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Voskresenskaya of Ruza district of Moscow province. In 1925, Father Nikolai was appointed a prior to the Church of the Holy Trinity in Kozhevniki in Moscow, being also ordained an archpriest. The church was built in 1689 and reflected the ancient greatness and charity of godly merchants' families. But in the beginning of the 20th century, the past greatness of the church began to fade, as many factories were built in that area. The number of parishioners decreased greatly, and the church was running out of money, so the new-coming priest tried to escape to another parish and considered this place to be unreliable and turbulent. After the Godless Revolution, things got even worse, and in 1925 the church was closed. For 2 weeks there were no liturgies until Father Nikolai was appointed. The first thing the priest began to do was creating a living parish. Father Nikolai served liturgies very often and preached after each of them. He organized theological discussions, inviting famous professors. These discussions were held in the evenings on Sundays, becoming true consolation for people in the time when there was much evil but lack of spiritual treasures. Upon the requests of Father Nikolai for praying, people brought miracle-making icons of Our Lady and Saint Tryphon. A group of constant parishioners who donated money for the needs of the church was created. It became usual when the prior of the church made his annual report about the spent money and the things that were done. The authorities watched the keen priest closely, and on the 28th of October 1929 he was arrested and put behind bars in Butyrka prison. Answering the questions of the interrogator, Father Nicholas said, "As a young priest, consciously, I do not aim any struggle against the Soviet authorities, and if I spoke to the faithful, I did it due to my religious beliefs and for the supporting of the Church." According to the 58th article of the Criminal Code, Father Nikolai was accused in anti-Soviet agitation. On the 20th of November 1929, special meeting of OGPU decided to exile Archpriest Nikolai to a concentration camp, and he was exiled to Solovki labor camp. When the prison term ended, Father Nikolai was exiled to Kazakhstan for the next 3 years. He returned in 1935 and settled in the village of Kukharina of Mazhaisk district. Visiting Moscow, he had meetings with nuns and abbesses, saying liturgy in a flat. For all this, he was blamed later. The 27th of April 1936, Father Nikolai was arrested and imprisoned in Butyrka prison. During the questioning, interrogator Baibus wanted to offend the priest and declared that even the wife of the priest considered him to be mad about religion and soon would ask for a divorce. "Don't worry, we won't make you a saint," he added with anger. On the 16th of May 1936, Father Nikolai declared to the persecutor about his termless hunger strike until his release. On the 20th of May 1936, the head of secret political department of NKVD promised the priest that a labor camp would be replaced with an exile. The following day, special meeting of NKVD sentenced Father Nikolai to 5 years of exile in a labor camp. In the summer of 1936 he was exiled to Ochtpetch in the town of Chibiu and then to the shore labor camp. On the 1st of December Father Nikolai declared his hunger strike once again, demanding to replace a labor camp with a single camera or an exile. On the 9th of December, the head of the labor camp sent a message that authorities reporting that with no opportunity to be incarcerated, the priest remains among the prisoners in the same barrack. Both his speeches and preachers corrupt the people there. On the 17th of December, doctors examined Father Nikolai and found him seriously ill, so the priest was sent to hospital. On the 21st of January 1937, the press sent a declaration to the head of the secret political department of NKVD, Timofeyev. He wrote, "Today is the 130th day of my hunger strike. Bible said that serving liturgy at home is a crime. I won't betray God up to my death, and I cannot agree that serving liturgy in any situation can be a crime. I won't agree with Bible that I should register my prayer in a civil organization after church was separated from the state. I'm a legal priest who was elected by people, and in this sphere I obey only to the bishop I have." The declaration was left without any response, but Father Nikolai continued to demand to be imprisoned in a single camera if there was no chance to be released. At last the persecutor declared that the requirement of the priest would be fulfilled. On the 15th of July, Father Nikolai stopped his hunger strike. But after such a long hunger, health conditions of Father Nikolai were so bad that doctors left him at a hospital. The head of the registry department, the former party member, who was sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment, reported that the priest crossed himself before every meal and in the morning prayed defiantly, standing in the corner, that he wore a cross and drew much attention from the administration of the hospital. On the 16th of August, despite bad health conditions, Father Nikolai was discharged from the hospital and sent to work with the rest of the prisoners. On the 27th of August, he was accused in anti-Soviet agitation. Father Nikolai refused to plead guilty. As the majority of the time of the imprisonment, Father Nikolai was at the hospital. The head of the hospital made a report on the priest. He wrote, "The priest obeys the hospital regime, is religious and tries to fast and pray if he is able to do that." On the 11th of September 1937, during the interrogation, Father Nikolai said, "I cannot stand the hustle and bustle of the modern life. It doesn't matter if I am sentenced either to life imprisonment or death penalty. I am ready to accept everything, but I don't want to be released as I feel myself to be an outcast in the modern life." On the 29th of September 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Nikolai to death penalty. Archpriest Nikolai Kabranov was executed on the 21st of December 1937 and buried in an unmarked grave. He was canonized in 2001. Both being free and being exiled, Father Nikolai sent his poems to his spiritual children and parishioners. Here is one of them. Pray on the day when you are happy, before your feet in hard times pray. Pray when the evil will happens, when you are embarrassed also pray. Pray on the day when you are humbled, and when in danger also pray. Pray if you ask for those who love you, and for the enemy you pray. Pray if no virtue is in soul, if you are proud also pray. And pray before your dear headstone, for soul of a newborn pray. Pray in the midst of temptation, if overcome yourself you pray. When there is no consolation, for being saved by love you pray. Holy Martyr Alexei was born on the 5th of October 1883 in the town of Buy of Kostroma province to the family of Alexander Nikolaevich Drozdov, the secretary of town administration, who also worked in Kostroma provincial post office. Alexei finished Galich Spiritual College and 3 courses of Kostroma Spiritual Seminary, and in 1902 became a teacher of a parish school in the village of Sudai of Chukhlom county of Kostroma province. After he married maiden Nadezhda Afanasyeva, and on the 22nd of October 1904, in Ipatiev Monastery, Vissarion Nechayev, the Bishop of Kostroma, ordained him a deacon to the Church of St. Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Nikolskaya of Nerikhta County. On the 9th of November 1906, Deacon Alexei was transferred to the Epiphany Church of the village of Krasnaya on Volga of Kostroma County. On the 15th of February 1910, Deacon Alexei Drozdov was transferred to the Trinity Church of the town factory of Lisva of Perm province. That was one of the biggest parishes of the diocese. On the 23rd of March the same year, for future sake of his position as a deacon, Father Alexei was appointed to the Church of the Female Convent of John the Baptist in the town of Pungur of Perm province, while on the 12th of July 1914 to the Church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary in the village of Chetvertinovka in Gaisinsk County of Podolsk province. Since the 8th of October 1916, Deacon Alexei began to serve at the Cathedral of the Wonder of Michael the Archangel in the town of Olgopol, where the prior at that time was Priest Polycarp Gulevich. Since 1917, Deacon Alexei served at the churches of towns of Ruza and Serpukhov, while in 1922 he returned to his native town of Buy of Kostroma province. Since 1928, Father Alexei again began to serve at churches of Moscow diocese, at first at the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of Smolensk in the village of Ivantiivka of Moscow province, where in 1929 he was awarded with a double deacon's stole. In a year, Deacon Alexei was appointed to the Church of the Annunciation of Our Lady on Berezhkach in Moscow. In 1930, for his zealous service he was ordained an archdeacon. From 1933, Archdeacon Alexei moved to his last place of service, to the Cathedral of the Nativity of Virgin Mary in the town of Rekhozuivo, where the prior was Archpriest Vasily Nikolsky, while the second priest was Nikolai Pospelov. At that time, the archdeacon was tearing apart between serving at a church and caring after seriously ill relatives. His wife, Nadezhda Afanasievna, had a confirmed heart defect. In 1932, his elder daughter Angelina, who was only 19, fell ill with rheumatism. In 3 years, she took her bed and would not get better the whole life. In 1936, his younger daughter Nadezhda fell ill with epilepsy, so Archdeacon Alexei had to be both a father and a nanny for his family. On the 9th of August 1937, after serving with Archdeacon Alexei, the rural dean wrote him a gratitude letter, admiring the wonderful and devout service of Father Alexei, appreciating him for great discipline and for kind attitude towards other clergymen. The last lines of the letter were prophetical. I wish you to be blessed by God, and hope that with the help of God for many years you will serve to the Church of Christ. Counted days later, the Russian Orthodox Church began to be severely persecuted. On the 17th of November 1937, Archdeacon Alexei Drozdov was arrested and imprisoned in Taganka in Moscow. As witnesses, 2 female parishioners of the cathedral were questioned by the investigator. They testified that knew the archdeacon only through his service at the church. They did not visit him at his place. As he lived aloof from the world, they did not hear any anti-Soviet preachers from him. However, the investigator wrote down their testimony in a completely different way, as Archdeacon Alexei organized counter-revolutionary activity and anti-Soviet agitation. After that, the investigator made the witnesses sign the protocols, and they faint-heartedly did it, slandering the archdeacon, who did not plead guilty in anti-Soviet agitation during the interrogation. In a few days, on the 21st of November, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region sentenced Archdeacon Alexei to 10 years of imprisonment in a labor camp, and he was sent to the first labor point of Suslov department of C block of Kemerovo region, where he arrived on the 18th of December. When people found out about the execution of the head of the NKVD, Nikolai Yezhov, many repressed and their relatives, being full of hope of triumph of justice, began to file petitions to review their cases. On the 14th of April 1939, Archdeacon Alexei also filed such petition to the NKVD. There he wrote that during the only interrogation, the investigator declared that there would have been some materials which condemned the Archdeacon in anti-Soviet agitation. When Father Alexei asked to name the people who had slandered him and to arrange a confrontation with them, the investigator denied doing it. The Archdeacon wrote, "Having a sick family to keep, the wife with a heart defect, the daughter with no abilities to move hands and legs, the other daughter who suffers from falling sickness, the family members that are not able both to work and to care about themselves. I had no time to communicate with people and to discuss anything. As apart from my service, I spent all my free time with my family, being both a servant and a nanny. I consider the indictment to be false, and from the other hand, I think that the trial without any witnesses, listening to my testimony, and the investigation is not fair, so I ask the Commissariat of the Internal Affairs to command to review my case." On the 10th of March 1940, the wife of the Archdeacon, Nadezhda Afanasyevna, also petitioned to the NKVD about the release of her husband. The NKVD officers found out that the investigator who had been reading the case of the Archdeacon had been arrested for falsification of several cases. One of the witnesses was arrested for anti-Soviet agitation, while the other denied her testimony. The additional witnesses who were questioned by investigators testified that during his service in the cathedral, Archdeacon Alexei had not agitated in anti-Soviet way, while they had not been at his place and heard from nobody about his anti-Soviet point of view. Finding himself in a difficult situation, the investigator began to question the informers from clergymen in order to get additional information about Father Alexei. On the 3rd of March 1940, a new case on the Archdeacon was opened, where the characteristics from the informers were put. Judging by these characteristics, on the 10th of April 1940, the new decree on the case of the Archdeacon was made, taking into consideration the testimony of the witness that was not questioned again, as well as the inquiries given by Moscow Diocese, where Drozdov is described as an active clergyman, and the fact that the punishment was not equal to his crime, basing on the decree of the NKVD from the 11th of November 1939, lessened the sentence to 5 years of imprisonment in a labor camp. However, camp administration gave negative characteristics on Archdeacon Alexei Drozdov. He is on collective work. His attitude towards labor is bad. He refuses to work very often. His behavior during everyday life is bad. He does not participate in cultural and public life, while his mood is hostile. Taken into consideration his bad attitude towards labor, as the person who denies to work and shows himself from a bad side during his time in the camp, he does not deserve any conditional early relief. On the 15th of June 1940, the case was reviewed and the decision about the lessening of the sentence was cancelled. In the new decree it was stated, taking into consideration the characteristics where Drozdov is characterized as an active clergyman and the person who denies to work, being an alien element, going by the order of the NKVD from the 23rd of January 1940, the decision of Troika should remain unchanged. Archdeacon Alexei Drozdov passed away on the 14th of July 1942 in Suslova department of C Block and was buried in an unmarked grave. His family did not know this, and in a year, on the 10th of May 1943, petitioned to the NKVD to release their father. On the 11th of April 2006, by the decree of the Holy Synod, Holy Martyr Alexei was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of the Russian Church. Holy Martyr Alexander Sokolov was born on the 8th of August 1881 in the village of Ramenia of Volokholamsk County of Moscow Province to the family of a priest of the Church of the Resurrection of Christ Pavel Stepanovich Sokolov and his wife Antonina Fedorovna. The newborn was baptized 4 days later by the prior of a local church, priest Stepan Uklonsky. It is known that in the family there were also sons, Alexei, Vitaly, and Valery. Alexander Pavlovich followed his father's footsteps, finishing a village school in 1892, Volokholamsk Spiritual College in 1898 on the 2nd class, and graduating from Bethany Spiritual Seminary in 1904. After that, he was appointed a teacher to a parish school at Joseph Volokholamsk Monastery. Alexander married maiden Claudia Alexeyevna, and in July 1905 was ordained a deacon to the Church of the Intercession of Virgin Mary in the village of Pokrovskaya of Klin County of Moscow Province, replacing their deacon Alexander Borisov. On the 10th of November 1908, daughter Vera was born to the Sokolovs. In total, the family had 2 children. On the 21st of June 1907, the prior of the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign of the village of Komlivo of Ruza County, priest Leonid Belayev, died. And already on the 17th of July the same year, by the order of Moscow Diocese, deacon of the Intercession Church of the village of Pokrovskaya of Klin County, Alexander Sokolov, was appointed a priest to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign of the village of Komlivo. On the 6th of May 1913, Father Alexander Sokolov was awarded with a waistcloth. On the 30th of August the same year, in the village of Komlivo there was a consecration of the renovated church and the setting of a new cross. Local priest Alexander Sokolov, as well as his father, the prior of the church of the village of Ivanovo of Volokholamsk County, Archpriest Pavel Sokolov, took part in the consecration. In October 1914, Father Alexander Sokolov was appointed to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady Joy of All Who Sorrow in the village of Fedorovskaya, where on the 6th of May 1916 was awarded with a purple velvet kufir for special proceedings as well as donations on military needs. In the village of Fedorovskaya, the priest faced the revolution, being deprived of voting rights as a clergyman after it. By 1921, priest Alexander Sokolov was appointed to the Church of Elijah the Prophet of the village of Cherkizovo of Moscow County. During the Soviet period, Father Alexander was ordained an archpriest. The last place of service of Archpriest Alexander Sokolov was the Church of Christ the Savior in the village of Paveltsevo of Dmitrov County of Moscow region, where he was appointed in 1934. By that time, his children grew up and lived separately. The priest told nobody their names or address. According to the materials of the archive investigation case, Father Alexander had no property and lived in a church gatehouse. On the 26th of January 1938, during the hard persecutions of the Orthodoxy, Archpriest Alexander Sokolov was arrested and imprisoned in Taganka in Moscow. He was accused in spreading the gossips about the soon overturn of the Soviet authorities, as well as the disorganization of kolkhoz work, cross processions, and anti-Soviet activity among the population. One of the false witnesses declared during the interrogation that the priest arranged public prayers in the village of Paveltsevo, disturbing collective farmers from harvesting. During the interrogations, Father Alexander did not plead guilty. 2 weeks later, on the 11th of February 1938, by the NKVD Troika of Moscow region, according to the 58th article, paragraph 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia, being accused in counter-revolutionary agitation, Archpriest Alexander Pavlovich Sokolov was sentenced to capital punishment. On the 17th of February 1938, the priest was executed and buried in the unmarked mass grave on Butva firing range area near Moscow. In August 2000, Archpriest Alexander Sokolov was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia. Holy Martyr Ivan Pokrovsky was born on the 2nd of July 1876 in Vozdvizhensky churchyard of Ruza County of Moscow Province, to the family of deacon of the Church of the Exaltation of Holy Cross Simeon Pokrovsky. But on the land of Ruza the Pokrovskys did not live for long. On the 7th of November 1877, Father Simeon was ordained a priest to the Church of Saint Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Oxinina of Kolomna County of the same province. On the 5th of January 1889, another son, Alexander, was born to the family of the priest. The sons followed their father's footsteps. In 1890, Ivan finished the Ikonospassky Spiritual College, while in 1896 he graduated from Moscow Spiritual Seminary and was appointed a teacher at the parish school of the village of Oxinina of Kolomna County of Moscow Province, where his father served. On the 18th of August 1897, Ivan Semyonov Pokrovsky, the teacher of a parish school of the village of Oxinina, married Maria, the daughter of deacon of the Church of Elijah the Prophet of the village of Turova, Alexei Vasilyev Levshinsky, and soon was ordained a deacon to the Church of Elijah the Prophet, replacing his father-in-law. In 1898, son Sergei was born to their young family, while in 1899, son Vasily. By the 1st of January 1910, Deacon Ivan was ordained a priest to the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Kondrzewo of Kolomna County of Moscow Province. On the 21st of April 1916, priest of the Resurrection Church of the village of Kondrzewo Ivan Pokrovsky was appointed to the Church of the Intercession of Virgin Mary of the village of Chirkina of the same county. At the Intercession Church, Father Ivan served for more than 20 years. In 1937, being ordained an archpriest and being appointed the rural dean of Malina district. In late 1930s, during the persecutions aiming to arrest priests of the Intercession Church of the village of Chirkina Ivan Pokrovsky and other faithful who helped him, the NKVD officers questioned people who might agree to give false evidence. The teacher of a local school in the village of Chirkina testified, "In September 1937, near our school, Pokrovsky, unknowingly of his religious propaganda, told children the following: Pray to God, and then you will study better. Do not be Satan's followers." I often notice Pokrovsky talking to children. That is clear as during breaks on religious holidays children go to church and put candles there. The school is just 10 meters away from the church. In summertime, when people at the church sing, it is heard at school. Now the church threatens us to take our school building as it belongs to the church. Moreover, the dome of the church developed cracks and leaned a bit, so in spring it can fall onto the school. One of the villagers testified. In August 1937, during meetings on Stalin's constitution, Pokrovsky said that the constitution was only for Bolsheviks and not for poor people that were plundered by the Soviet authorities. In the constitution it was written that there was liberty, but what this liberty was? If peasants were plundered, bells were taken off. It was the persecutions of Orthodox peasants. According to the evidence of false witnesses, the arrest warrant of priest Ivan Pokrovsky was signed by the NKVD of Moscow region. There it was written that in the village of Chirkina lives Ivan Semyonovich Pokrovsky, who both before and after the revolution until this very moment worked and works as a priest. In 1937 he was ordained an archpriest and appointed the rural dean of Malina district. Being dissatisfied with the current regime, he agitates in the anti-Soviet way and grew especially insolent after the constitution and elective constitution to the Supreme Soviet were issued. He slandered the Soviet government and chairman of the party, as well as kolkhoz building. His house is often visited by wandering clergymen of not only Malina but also Kolomna and Ozeri districts and others. As a result, horse and pig virus was brought, while 3 horses have been recently stolen from the barn. The Pope, during the talks on this topic, says that it is the punishment of God, that people need to go to church and pray to God. On the 27th of January 1938, the authorities arrested Archpriest Ivan and put him behind bars in Kashira. The next day, the priest was questioned. According to the materials we have, among the population you expressed your hostility towards the Soviet authorities. I cannot remember any talks when there were any words hostile towards the Soviet authorities, except for the words appealed to the faithful, to pray for the innocent people who were imprisoned by the Soviet authorities. Among the faithful you have said that the Soviet authorities oppress the church and clergymen, also slandering the Soviet government. I have told the faithful that there is no allowance to serve at a parish freely, while earlier it was allowed. From one hand, it is written that religious rights are allowed, while from another hand, we do not see this freedom. I give you the excerpt from the evidence about your counter-revolutionary activity. Do you accept your words? I deny this, as I told nobody anything like this. It is known that you have organized a group of wandering clergymen of Malina, Kolomna, and other districts. Do you accept this? I accept that the clergymen of Malina, Kolomna, and other districts visited me. On the 16th of February, the priest was questioned by the investigators once again. Who visited you in your flat? I was visited by the wife of the priest of the village of Botnikova, who came on the 18th of January 1938 and told that her husband, Sergei Andreevich Orlov, was arrested by the NKVD. 2 years ago, I was visited by the priest of the village of Mesherina, Fomintsev, while in autumn 1937 I was visited by the priest of the village of Fedorovskaya, Mikhail Pokrovsky. What talks did you have with the clergyman that visited you? During visits of the priests, we talked with priest Fomintsev that according to the constitution, religious rights must be allowed, but indeed to serve at a parish is not allowed by the authorities on the presence of bringing some varices. We think it is not right. I had no talks with priest Pokrovsky about Soviet authorities. Who have you visited? I mean from the clergymen. I have visited Figurina, Kotova, Kornieva, priests Fomintsev and Mikhail Pokrovsky. We talked about religious rights and how the faithful should go to church. There were talks that the Soviet authorities do not allow to serve at a parish. Fomintsev told me, now it is very difficult to live as the Soviet authorities oppress good people. Then Fomintsev added that we should bear all the hardships. There were no other talks against Soviet authorities. According to the materials we have, among collective farmers of the villages of Chirkino and Sherbinino, you expressed hostility towards Soviet authorities. I did not agitate among collective farmers against Soviet authorities. I only preached every time that the faithful should pray for the best people who were imprisoned by the Soviet authorities. Do you accept your guilt in anti-Soviet agitation among the collective farmers, as well as in organizing a counter-revolutionary group in the village of Chirkino? There was no any anti-Soviet agitation among the collective farmers. I was only dissatisfied with the fact that serving at the parish was not allowed by the Soviet authorities. The interrogation was over. On the 21st of February, for systematic anti-Soviet and counter-revolutionary agitation, aimed at ruining nearby collective farms, as well as active religious and anti-Soviet slander, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region sentenced him to capital punishment. On the 26th of February 1938, the members of Church Council, Anna Kornieva, Domna Kotova, Preposta Natalia Figurina, and Archpriest John Pokrovsky were executed and buried in the unmarked mass grave on Butva firing range area near Moscow. In 2001, Archpriest John Pokrovsky was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
Monastic martyr Mikhaila Marfa Ivanovna Ivanova was born in 1867 in the village of Ivanovo of Ruza County of Moscow province to a peasant's family. In her youth, she retired to the convent of Our Lady of Kazan in the village of Golovino, which was founded in 1876 by Moscow merchant Nikita Ignatievich Sidorov. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were more than 70 nuns and novices there. After militant godless people came to power, the convent was closed, and their sanatorium was made, but the nuns did not leave their monastery. Novice Marfa stayed in the village of Golovino, going to former monastery church to pray, and worked as a dishwasher. In this way she lived there 5 years, until the authorities began to dismiss nuns and novices from the sanatorium, and many of them had to settle in the nearest villages or move to Moscow. The constitution of the year 1936 declared about the freedom of worship, while the majority of the faithful were to be executed. The witnesses of those persecutions say that each old lady who went to a church was noticed by OGPU officers for future oppressions, but monasteries and monks were the main obstacle for the godless. It is known that monks were buried into the ground alive. Monks had to bear severe tortures, but they denied neither God nor their monastic vows. In those conditions, the monks who survived after the closing of the monasteries did not deny their monastic faith, but continued to live as monks in the world secretly. They did not deny their monastic vows of celibacy, non-possession, and obedience. They gathered in private flats to serve secret liturgies and take monastic vows. At that time, the spiritual father of Marfa, as well as of many other nuns and novices of Golovitsky convent, was Archimandrite Ambrose Astachov, who settled in the village of Aksinino of Krasnogorsk district of Moscow region after monasteries were closed. In the beginning of 1930s, he made Marfa Ivanovna a nun with the name Mikhaila. She already had the experience of monastic life and became a strict and devout nun, known by the faithful for her righteous way of life. Schema nun Mikhaila was arrested on the 26th of August 1937 when the most cruel persecutions of the Russian Orthodox Church began. Several days later, she was questioned. One of the attendant witnesses told NKVD officers that Schema nun Mikhaila was known among her admirers as blissful and penetrating, while her flat indeed was a secret church, where there were secret liturgies and people secretly took monastic vows. She said that there were persecutions of religion and clergy, that people were arrested, exiled, and executed without any guilt, and people died from hunger and cold. At her flat there was a shelter for popes and monks who returned from their exile. Everyone who participated in secret liturgies and taking monastic vows knew their fate, but like the first Christians, new martyrs fearlessly faced their death, understanding the immortality of human soul and the reward that was awaiting for them in the heavens. All these people were oppressed. Schema nun Mikhaila was accused in gathering the faithful in her flat, in participation in secret liturgies, and taking monastic vows. On the 8th of October 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Schema nun Mikhaila to death penalty. Schema nun Mikhaila was executed on the 11th of October 1937 on Butva firing range area near Moscow and buried in the unmarked mass grave. On the 31st of July 1989, Marfa Ivanovna Ivanova was rehabilitated by the prosecutor's office of Moscow region. Schema nun Mikhaila was canonized as a holy martyr and confessor of Russia by the decree of the Holy Synod on the 7th of May 2003.
Monastic martyr Sergius Bukashkin was born on the 23rd of January 1884 in the village of Chertanovo of Ostasheva parish of Ruza County of Moscow province to the family of a peasant Vasily Bukashkin, and was baptized as Ioan. When the boy was 13, his parents sent him to Chudov monastery in Moscow. Ivan was accepted as an obedient and served in a choir. Living in the monastery, he graduated from a seminary for teachers, and then was allowed to teach at primary college. On the 14th of June 1914, Ivan Vasilievich took monastic vows with the name Sergius and was appointed a teacher at the monastery school for disciples. In 1916, monk Sergius was reassigned to the monastery of the Intercession of Virgin Mary in Moscow, and the same year he was ordained a hierodeacon. Possibly the reassignment was connected with both a male parish school and Moscow pastoral courses that were at the monastery. After the revolutionary events in 1918-1919, many monks of the Intercession monastery, especially the young ones, took a leave and went to their home places for 3 or 6 months to visit their relatives. Not all of them managed to come back because of the Red Terror that was ramping everywhere. Some of monks, with Father Sergius among them, moved to serve somewhere near their home place to have a chance to support their parents and relatives.
In 1919, Hierodeacon Sergius was appointed to the Church of the Transfiguration of Christ in the village of Spasy-Stashevo of Volokholamsk County of Moscow Province, being ordained a hieromonk to the same church in 1930. In 1935, hieromonk Sergius was awarded with a Golden Pectoral Cross. In February 1937, Father Sergius Bukashkin was reassigned to the Church of St. Alexander Svirsky of the village of Nova Alexandrovka of Volokholamsk district of Moscow region, while in summer the same year, the most savage persecutions of the Russian Orthodox Church began. In January 1938, the NKVD investigator called some false witnesses for the interrogation, who signed the protocols that were needed to arrest Father Sergius. Answering the question about counter-revolutionary activity of the priest, they said, "Living in the village of Nova Alexandrovka, Bukashin, indeed both in the village and in nearby settlements, is gathering faithful people around himself, agitating among them for the faith in God, also agitating in a counter-revolutionary way against the village events of the party and Soviet authorities." For example, in December 1937, near the church, he was asking the faithful for help for the church and the clergy in the following way: "Our life during the Soviet regime is very bad, as the Soviet authorities have taxed us heavily. If you, faithful people, do not help clergymen and our church, it will be closed because of the unpaid taxes." After that, the praepostor of the church and faithful people gathered products and money to help the clergy and the church. The head and the secretary of the village council revealed that hieromonk Sergius among crowds said that the elections to the Supreme Soviet are faked up, as you just need to take a ballot paper with already prepared name of the deputy and put it into a voting box. According to the constitution, we are able to elect any person we want, while indeed we are made to vote for the deputies who have been already elected. In the end of December 1937, in the building of the Nova Alexandrovka village council, he said, "We have already been impoverished by the taxes of the Soviet authorities, while now I am being taxed in the wrong way. It is just a humiliation of the clergy. You make me go to your institutions in search of truth that cannot be found anywhere, as there is only delusion everywhere, and nothing else." In the beginning of January 1938, he said, "The Soviet authorities are now pressing the clergy so heavily that we cannot live anymore. They want the Orthodox faith to be eliminated, as priests are arrested everywhere." At night between the 16th and 17th of February 1938, hieromonk Sergius Bukashkin was arrested, being accused in counter-revolutionary agitation against events of the Soviet authorities, and imprisoned in the town of Volokholamsk. During the interrogations, Father Sergius did not plead guilty in the indictment. Already on the 18th of February the same year, the investigation was over and the indictment was sent to the Troika to be reviewed. On the 27th of February 1938, according to the 58th article, paragraph 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region sentenced hieromonk Sergius to capital punishment. He was transferred to the Ganka prison in Moscow. Shortly before the accusation, on the 2nd of March, prison photographer took an image of him for an executor. Hieromonk Sergius Bukashkin was executed on the 7th of March 1938 and buried in an unmarked mass grave on Butovo firing range area near Moscow. In 2002, monastic martyr Sergius Bukashkin was canonized as a holy martyr and confessor of the Russian Orthodox Church. Holy Martyr Vasily was born on the 20th of March in 1876 in the village of Spasskaya of Ruza County of Moscow Province to the family of psalmist Arseny Sungurov. After graduating from Volokholamsk Spiritual School, Vasily was appointed to the diocesan office and in 1898 was ordained a psalmist to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Amelfino of Volokholamsk County. On the 20th of September the same year he was blessed to wear Istikarion. Later, by Bishop Parfeni of Maraisk, psalmist Vasily Sungurov was appointed to the Church of the Icon of the Mother of God, Joy of all who sorrow, of the village of Fedorovskaya of the same county. These years Vasily Arsenievich married Pelageya Alexeyevna. They had 5 daughters and 1 son. In 1910 he began to serve as a psalmist at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Zhigalovo of Bogorodsk County, being ordered a deacon to the same church in 1915, while in 1919 he was ordained a priest to the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in the village of Ulitkino of Bogorodsk County. For many years after the closure of the church in 1934, he was a prior of the Church of St. Mary Magdalene. Despite serving in the atmosphere of increasing persecutions, Father Vasily was dedicated to the duties of a priest up to the end. It was known that one day intruders set fire to the house of Father Vasily during the liturgy, but the priest, having found it out, did not interrupt the divine service and trusted the will of God. Another time a barn near the church was burned. The participants of the cross procession were blamed for this action. Both the priest and his family had to stand the hostility of the fellow villagers who had accepted the atheistic ideology, as well as to face the pressure of the authorities, for whom being a church clerk was equal to being the enemy of a new regime. But the faithful bore their cross with courage and tried to defend the church as long as possible. At last the authorities managed to close the church and leave it to the collective farming bezbozhnik as a barn or a club. In 1935 Father Vasily was appointed to serve at Epiphany Church in the village of Brikovo of Istra district. In 1936 he was awarded with a pectoral cross. Father Vasily was arrested on the 28th of August in 1937 and was imprisoned in Taganka prison in Moscow. 2 witnesses gave their evidence against the priest. Then Father Vasily was questioned. After listening to the false evidence, he denied his guilt in counter-revolutionary activity. We know very little about the life of Father Vasily. According to the reminiscences, he was a modest priest at a village church who spent his life serving and doing simple peasants' chores. No books were written about the priest, and there was time when even any talk about him was dangerous. A few memories that we have now were saved by the grandchildren of the priest, who were not even of school age when he was arrested, and there are some photos, the silent witnesses of that long lost time, that show us people who passed away. People say that Father Vasily was strict and self-demanding to others and to himself, and at the same time he was a jack of all trades. After he was arrested, his relatives knew nothing about his fate for a long time, while his faithful spouse, Pelageya, waited for his return up to her death. On the 19th of September 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Vasily to death penalty. Priest Vasily Sungurov was executed the following day, on the 20th of September 1937, and buried in the unmarked mass grave on Butov firing range near Moscow. On the 20th of April 2005, Holy Martyr Vasily was canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church as the Holy Martyr and Confessor of Russia. Holy Martyr Alexander Pokrovsky was born on the 14th of August 1879 in the village of Kazanovo of Ruza County of Moscow Province, to the family of psalmist Mikhail Grigorovich and his wife Maria Alexeyevna. In the family there were 6 daughters and 4 sons. They lived in poverty. Often there was neither enough their own bread until new harvest, nor money to buy it, and parents sent children to their neighbors and to the nearest village to borrow some bread. From the age of 10, children helped the father in his work. They seeded, harvested, mowed, and gathered hay, and father bought them small scythes. When children grew up, they did not stop doing farm duties and sometimes even worked daily on a farm for a local priest or deacon. In such cases, they were paid with half of hay, while the rest was given to the host. When elder children had to leave for seminary to study, their father had to sell half of hay to pay for transport. The children did not come back during Christmas or Easter holidays, as there was no money, returning home only in the end of the course. Alexander got primary education at Zemstvo school. In 1897 he finished the Spiritual College of Volokholamsk. In 1905 he graduated from the Bethany Spiritual Seminary. After that, Alexander was appointed a teacher at a village school. In 1906 he was ordained a deacon to the Church of St. Nicholas, a Miracle Maker, at the Engineering College on Bakhmetyevskaya Street in Moscow, while in 1909 he was transferred to the Church of St. Vladimir on Starosatsky Lane in Moscow, working as a teacher of the law of God at the same time. In 1910 his father fell seriously ill and had to retire, and Deacon Alexander had to earn a living for the family, while 3 of his sisters were not married yet, and 2 of them did not have any education. At that time he had to live in grinding poverty. In 1919 he was ordained a priest and served at the Church of St. Elizabeth at Dorogomilov Cemetery. After the Bolshevik Revolution the life became even harder, and Father Alexander was looking around for any job, as he said. He worked in Tatar Commissariat on the Kremlin embankment, where his duty was to supply a canteen with food and keep it tidy. Also he worked as a bookkeeper at a food store of a working cooperative, as a supernumerary during the census of Moscow, as a janitor of a quarterly household. Since 1923 he began to serve the church only, leaving all the secular jobs. At first the priest lived in a flat near the Church of St. Vladimir on Starosatsky Lane, while in March 1929 he moved to Mozhaisk Road Street that was closer to the Church of St. Elizabeth. On the 15th of August 1930, Father Alexander was arrested and on the 22nd of October was accused of being a member of an active counter-revolutionary organization that aimed to do some terroristic actions towards the leaders of the Soviet Union and mainly towards Comrade Stalin, using the plan prepared beforehand. The investigation and repeated interrogations lasted for 2 months, and despite the fact that the intention of doing a terroristic action was not proved, on the 30th of November 1930, the OGPU Troika sentenced Father Alexander to 10 years of exile to a concentration camp, and he was sent to Solovki. On the 10th of June 1933, before the appointed time, Father Alexander was released from Solovki concentration camp and went to the town of Kolomna of Moscow region, and then to the town of Volokholamsk, where he began to work as a stableman. He was threatened by the NKVD not to serve anymore. The priest's wife also tried to persuade him to stop serving at the church, but he listened neither to the advice of the enemy nor the advice of relatives and began to do his best to get a place to serve. In 1934, Father Alexander was appointed to the Church of the Holy Trinity in the village of Novonikolskaya of Shakhova district. In 1936, he was ordained an archpriest. Serving there, he did not give up his preaching and duties as a priest. In the village of Novonikolskaya, he had to face the authorities that demanded taxes higher that he was obliged to pay, but he did not give up, as that meant leaving the church service. In late September 1937, the priest moved to the village of Novovasilievskaya to serve at the Church of the Intercession of the Virgin Mary. On the 10th of October 1937, the head of the college council was demanded by the local NKVD department to prepare a characteristic paper concerning the priest. At the same time, 2 attendant witnesses, the head of the village council and the taskmaster, were questioned. The head of the village council said that Alexander Mikhailovich Pokrovsky came to the village of Novovasilievskaya on the 21st of September 1937 and at once began to agitate collective farmers against the Soviet authorities. Under the pretense of being acquainted with the parish, he walked around the houses of collective farmers from the 21st of September to the 5th of October and held anti-Soviet agitation. In addition, on the 29th of September, being among the collective farmers, he said, "Your church is without a shepherd, as the Soviet authorities have beheaded it, and you need to strengthen your faith and help the church. Celebrate all the holidays of Christ, especially the intercession of the Virgin Mary." On the 12th of November 1937, Archpriest Alexander was arrested and imprisoned in Taganka prison in Moscow. The interrogation there was short but comprehensive. Answering the indictment of the investigators, the priest said, "I did not plead guilty in counter-revolutionary and anti-Soviet agitation. I did not hold any counter-revolutionary and anti-Soviet agitation, but I taught the faithful only my religious beliefs, the teaching of God, appealing them not to deny God. On the 16th of November 1937, the investigation was over, while on the 23rd of November the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Alexander to death penalty. Archpriest Alexander Pokrovsky was executed on the 27th of November 1937 and buried in the unmarked mass grave on Butva firing range area near Moscow. On the 21st of August 2007, by the decree of Holy Synod, Archpriest Alexander Pokrovsky was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
Holy Martyr Alexander Pokrovsky was not only an outstanding preacher, but also a true patriot. He felt deeply about the motherland that was sinking in the waves of endless strife and persecutions, and he saw the roots of all that was happening. In one of his preachers to his parishioners, the priest said, "Christ the Savior urges us to fight with our vices and passions, but not with outward conditions. While in our modern life there is the struggle that has been of the other origin, being absorbed by evil and envy, separate social classes and individual, fight with each other. There is no internal struggle that Christ the Savior urged us to carry on. Meanwhile, exactly the internal strife of a man with falsehood and evil inside now is a must for our revival and renewal. We must be firmly convinced that any forms of ideal social fabric would not make our life better before a man overcomes his internal vices and passions. Now people do not take into consideration any moral dignity of the measures to fight, and the measures are considered allowable, if only they help to achieve a goal. As a result, people use the measures that can be suggested only by the evil of hell, the measures that can lead only to the destruction of all that was created by preceding generations, the elimination of both property and lives of the neighbors in the most wild, cruel, and merciless way. A Christian must accomplish the feat of his life with love and kindness towards the neighbors, living honestly with prayer, being full of hope that God will keep his promise before each of his slaves. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. When a person loses his faith in Jesus Christ the Savior, and does not accept the power of God all around our universe, then he is deprived of the firm basis of life. At last he is deprived of the power that is truly to create life. Then a man is absorbed by personal despotism and self-will. A man is sure that he is the measure of all things, the measure of true and false, of good and evil. This is the reason of negation of all moral duties, and for such a man there is nothing sacred, nothing valuable, and that is why he is eager to make the revolution of human values. The motivation for such a man is not love, but pride and vanity. Denying God and Christ, he begins to consider himself a superman, a God-man, and brings to life only trouble, strife, and destruction.
We are at the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Ivoilova, where Holy Martyr Dmitry Blagoveshensky served.
Holy Martyr Dmitry was born on the 22nd of October 1879 in the village of Timonino of Bogorodsk County of Moscow Province to the family of Deacon Fyodor Blagoveshensky. After graduating from a spiritual college, Dmitry Fyodorovich continued his education in Moscow Spiritual Seminary. After studying there for a year, on the 22nd of May 1900, by Bishop of Dmitrov Nestor Mitaniev, he was appointed a psalmist to the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of the Sign in the village of Ilyinskaya of Kolomenskaya County. In a year, serving there in good faith, on the 20th of May 1901, psalmist Dmitry was blessed by Bishop Nestor to wear a stacharion. From the 19th of May 1904 to 1906, Dmitry Fyodorovich worked as a teacher at parish school for free. These years, Dmitry Fyodorovich married maiden Pavla Vasilievna. The couple didn't have their own children, and showing their best human and Christian qualities, they did a good deed, adopted an orphan girl, Ekaterina Vasilievna Zhiltova, who became for them like their own daughter.
On the 20th of September 1906, by the order of Metropolitan Vladimir Bogayevlensky, Dmitry Fedorovich was transferred to the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Ivoylovo of Voskresensk County to occupy the position of a deacon there. On the 20th of October the same year, he was ordained a deacon by Anastasy Gribanovsky, the Bishop of Serpukhov. In 1913, Deacon Dmitry Blagoveshchinsky was awarded with a medal in memory of the 300th anniversary of Romanov dynasty to wear on his chest with Vladimir ribbon. The revolution brought hardships to Father Dmitry, as well as to many church clergy. Searching different reasons, authorities judged Father Dmitry repeatedly. In 1918 and in 1919 he was fined for incorrect preparation of bills. The parish was poor. The parishioners collected money to pay taxes and helped the deacon's family with products. He was on volunteer corps, gathered potatoes in kolkhoz, worked as a cooperative accountant, did the job of an accountant in the town of Ruza. There people offered him to continue to work as an accountant if he left the position of a priest, but Father Dmitry answered, "I cannot leave the church." In 1918 he was sentenced to 3 years of exile out of Moscow region, as well as to disposition for not paying taxes and not completing a firm task on spring grains harvesting. However, the locals did not want to stay without their church and shepherd. They collected the needed money and products to help the deacon. In 1929, during the disposition of kulaks, the Blagoveshchinsky were deprived of their land, cow and horse. Their taxes were doubled, from 50 rubles to 106. Then, depriving the priest of living and forbidding him to carry on religious rites, authorities confiscated other families' property for not paying taxes and not completing a firm task on wood preparation. On the 1st of January 1931, Deacon Dmitry was ordained a priest to the Resurrection Church. That year the priest was arrested 3 times because he was not able to pay enormous taxes. In October, the priest was sentenced to the exile out of Moscow region for not completing a firm task again. The church could have stayed without the priest. One November Sunday, after the liturgy, Father Dmitry declared the indictment to the parishioners and wept, asking them for help. The people in the church also wept. Then they collected money and products for the priest, and the closure of the church was delayed for some time. The sentence was appealed against in the All-Russian Central Executive Committee and recalled. On the 10th of April 1932, Father Dmitry Blagoveshchinsky was arrested again, that time being accused in anti-Soviet agitation. He was imprisoned in Volokоламsk. During his first interrogation, the priest said, "I, Blagoveshchinsky, have never had anything against the Central Soviet authorities. However, I have always showed and show my dissatisfaction against the local representatives that work in the villages, like communists, heads of college councils, and others. That is why people, and especially clergy, are treated in the wrong way. I have first-hand knowledge, as I was judged repeatedly for the last 2 or 3 years. I was offended, so I showed my dissatisfaction more. I was not only pressed with taxes, but I also was forbidden to carry on religious rites at homes of my parishioners. However, no matter how local authorities offended me, people always helped me, as the faithful sympathized me deeply." The next day, during another interrogation, Father Dmitry added, "I declare openly, as I cannot accept present Soviet authorities as well as their regime. I think that Soviet authorities use only violence towards people. Let's take religion. Religion is persecuted, oppressed, and eliminated, while the clergy are just deprived of living. And where should a clergyman go? Nowhere. Such conditions were created to eliminate us everywhere, while we need to exist. These measures are taken against the will of people. We know, no matter how Soviet authorities do this work, still most of working people love the church and cannot live without religion. Secondly, I consider that the management of the country is wrong. In most cases, the people who are to manage are not able to do it, by their actions causing discontent of people, especially of the clergy. For example, as for me, Throughout all the revolutionary period, especially for the last 2 years, I was judged and taxed for several times, being given firm tasks, and being offended. Even my poor dog was shot by the secretary. But for what purpose? Is not it a humiliation? Is not it violence? Speaking about creating collective farms, instead of willing entering the kolkhoz, men are taken there by force, and every man being afraid of repressions has to enter it. And what is happening in kolkhoz? Peasants are starving, cattle are without any food too, hay meadows are not mown, because peasants have no desire to work for kolkhoz. Personally, I spoke repeatedly about my point of view on Soviet authorities among some of my parishioners, and they shared my opinion. I accept the indictment for anti-Soviet agitation. The investigation that was begun on the 11th of April in 2 days filed a charge, and on the 27th of April 1932, according to the 58th article, paragraph 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia, the OGPU Troika sentenced the priest to 3 years of imprisonment in a labor camp. Already on the 5th of May of the same year, through Butyrka prison, Father Dmitry was sent with the first echelon to the station of Medvezhya Gora in Belbald-Lag of the Karelia Republic. On the 15th of December 1932, priest Dmitry Blagoveshensky passed away in the 4th camp point at the station of Kuzema of Murmansk Railway Road of the town of Kem of the Karelia Republic and was buried in the unmarked grave. On the 14th of May 1991, Father Dmitry was rehabilitated. On the 17th of July 2002, by the decree of Holy Synod, Holy Martyr Dmitry Blagoveshensky was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
We are the Church of the Nativity of Christ in the village of Rождествено, where Holy Martyr Emelian Goncharov served.
Holy Martyr Emelian Goncharov was born on the 5th of August in 1882 in the village of Staraya Poltavka of Novouzhensk, County of Samara Province, to the family of peasant Nikolai Goncharov. The village was founded in the first part of the 19th century by immigrants from left-back Ukraine. The patron saint of the newborn boy was Holy Confessor Emelian, Bishop of Cyzicus, whose Remembrance Day is on the 8th of August. It is not exactly known when Emelian left his native village, but after finishing 6 classes of town college in Vladimir, he was an obedient at Bogolubovo Monastery of the Nativity of the Virgin Mary, near Vladimir, from 1904 to 1907. On the 6th of February 1907, Emelian was temporarily allowed to serve as a psalmist at the Church of St. Andrew of Crete, in the village of Andreevskaya Turkina of Alexandrov County of Vladimir Province. He replaced his future father-in-law on this duty, who died on the 17th of December 1906. On the 16th of February 1907, 24-year-old Emelian Antonovich Goncharov married 28-year-old Pelageya Ivanovna Kudryavtseva. They lived with their mother-in-law, Praskovia Andreevna Kudryavtseva. On the 27th of May the same year, Emelian Antonovich was officially ordained a psalmist and began to serve. The salary of a psalmist, especially at a small parish like Andreevskaya, was low, so the family was poor. Farming was a bit of a help, as well as 50 rubles, which widow Kudryavtseva got as a pension from the Treasury Department of Alexandrov County. Later, in the column Property Before 1917 of the profile of the arrested completed by NKVD officers, it was written that Father Emelian had a house with a yard, with some barns, and a cow. The family had nothing except this. On the 5th of March 1908, a boy named Alexander was born to the Goncharovs. He was baptized the next day at the Cathedral of the Nativity of Christ in the town of Alexandrov. The prior of the cathedral, Archpriest Nikolai Florinsky, was a godfather. On the 21st of October 1910, a girl Nina was born, but she died in infancy. On the 13th of April, the second son, Ivan, was born, while on the 15th of October 1913, the third son, Mikhail, was born, but he died on the 21st of July 1914. On the 11th of December 1912, Emelian Antonovich Goncharov was officially appointed a psalmist of the village of Andreevskaya Turkino. He served at that parish more than 8 years. On the 8th of May 1915, Emelian Antonovich was transferred to the new place of service, to the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker of the village of Nesterova of Pereslavl County, now it's in Yaroslavl region. On the 9th of September 1916, upon his own request, Emelian Goncharov was returned to his previous place of service to the village of Andreevskaya Turkino, while on the 11th of July 1918 he left his position and moved to Saratov province. In 1921, Emelian Goncharov was ordained a deacon. It is known that in 1924, Deacon Emelian Goncharov served at the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of Kazan in Saratov, along with his prior, Archpriest Lev Arkhangelsky. On the 16th of March 1929, the Church of the Icon of Our Lady of Kazan was closed. In 1930, being left without a place to serve, Deacon Emelian was ordained a priest and continued to serve at different churches of Saratov. In 1932, priest Konstantin Speransky, who was an acquaintance of Father Emelian, offered him to move to the Church of the Nativity of Christ in the village of Rождественно of Novopetrovsk district of Moscow region, where Father Konstantin served one day and where a prior died. Father Emelian accepted the invitation and after being blessed by the hierarchy began to serve at a new place. In 1933, Father Emelian was awarded with a waistcloth, while in 1936 with a skufia. On the 17th of October 1937, the authorities arrested the priest and imprisoned him in the town of Volokоламsk. During the search in the former church barn that before Father Emelian's arrival already belonged to school, 25 bullets for a rifle were found. Also there were church books and magazines of Moscow Patriarchy of the year 1931. Due to the fact that the priest was noticed coming inside the barn, he was accused in keeping the bullets as well as participation in the counter-revolutionary activity. The same day, the head of the collective farming was questioned as a witness. He stated that in August 1937, having come to the farm office, the priest asked why he was not allowed to go to the churches of faithful with icons. He said that in the constitution it was written that it was allowed to do it, while they, the authorities, did not allow. Goncharov declared that the Soviet authorities created the constitution only to deceive people, as one thing was written there, while the other thing was done indeed. On the 15th of October, the head of Novopetrovsk department of NKVD of Moscow region made up an accusation concerning Emelian Antonovich Goncharov, according to the 58th article of the Criminal Code of Russia. The accusation was made in a completely illiterate way, as the native village of Saint Emelian, Staraya Poltavka, became the station of Politovka, Novouzhensk County became Nizhny Uzelsky, while Volga German Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic became the Ukraine Soviet Socialist Republic. Even the names of false witnesses were printed with mistakes. Nevertheless, case number 11790 was sent to NKVD of Moscow region to be considered by Troika. On the 22nd of October, Father Emelian was transferred to Moscow prison number 1, where the only known photo of the saint was taken. In this prison photo it is evident that even at that time the martyr was dressed in a priest's cassock. He faced his executors denying false evidence of the accusation, but he did not refuse to wear the clothes given him as a servant of the altar of God. On the 3rd of November 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced Father Emelian to death penalty. Priest Emelian Goncharov was executed on the 5th of November and buried in the unmarked mass grave on Butva firing range ground near Moscow. On the 30th of June 1989, Emelian Goncharov was rehabilitated by the Prosecutor's Office of Moscow region. In August 2000, Priest Emelian Goncharov was canonized by the Holy Synod as a new martyr and confessor of Russia. We're at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Nikolskaya Gagarina, where Holy Martyr Ilya Rylko served. Holy Martyr Ilya Rylko was born in 1881 in a village of Redomля of Tolochinsky County of Vitebsk province in the family of peasant Ignatiy Rilko. The newborn boy was named after the prophet of God, Elijah. Ilya studied at a local parish school, then entered a seminary for teachers. After graduated from the seminary, Ilya Ignatievich served as a psalmist at the church of the village of Khlebnaya of Vitebsk province from 1906 to 1913. In 1914 he was ordained a priest. Up to 1934, Father Ilya served at churches of Usokhskaya Bul, Khlebnaya and Blagovichi villages of Vitebsk province. The third life of the priest was connected to the village of Nikolskaya Gagarina of Novopetrovsky district of Moscow region. Father Ilya served at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker until the 25th of September 1937. In 1936 he was ordained an archpriest. On the 26th of September 1937, Father Ilya was appointed to the Church of St. Ilya of Ilyinskaya village of Solnichengorsk district of Moscow region. However, the priest served at a new place a bit more than a month. On the 30th of October 1937, he was arrested as a church clergy and imprisoned in Taganka prison for the next 3 weeks. The investigator questioned the head of the collective farming, who stated that he heard the priest said that in the constitution it was written about the liberty of religion, that it was not forbidden to go to people's houses with icons, but indeed it was not allowed, and the Soviet authorities taxed popes heavily in order to demolish religion. In the constitution it was written one thing, while indeed there was another. The other witness said that the priest attracted children to the church, and that his 5-year-old son was among those children. He added that his son was attracted to the church, where the Pope treated him with holy honey and a kind of a honey cake, also teaching him how to cross himself and to bend. On the 19th of November 1937, according to the 58th article of Criminal Code of Russia, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region accused Father Ilya in anti-Soviet agitation and sentenced him to death penalty. 21st of November 1937, the priest was executed on Butuo firing range area near Moscow and buried in the unmarked mass grave. On the 30th of June 1989, Father Ilya was rehabilitated by the Prosecutor's Office of Moscow region. On the 7th of May 2003, Holy Martyr Ilya was canonized by the decree of Holy Synod as a new martyr and confessor of Russia.
Where the Church of Michael the Archangel, in the village of Mikhailovskaya, where Holy Martyr Nikolai Vinogradsky lived.
Holy Martyr Nikolai Vinogradsky was born on the 3rd of September 1873 in Moscow to the family of priest Vasily Ilyich Vinogradsky, the clergyman of the Holy Trinity Church in Zubov. After graduating from the Volokholamsk Theological College, Nikolai Vasilievich entered the Moscow Theological Seminary, which he graduated from in 1894. Nikolai Vasilievich worked as a teacher in the parish school of the Transfiguration Church on Peskar in Karetny Rad in Moscow since 1895. After his marriage to Nadezhda Alexeyevna in 1897, he was ordained a priest to the Church of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross in the village of Krastovosdvizhinskaya of Klinsky country of Moscow province. From 1899 to 1901, Father Nikolai served in Moscow. From 1901 to 1918, he served in the village of Ryukhovskaya of Volokholamsk county. After the revolution, the priest changed many parishes as churches began to be closed one by one, and you had to have great patience and hope in God in order not to lay down their priesthood, not to deny God, and continue to serve at new and new parishes in those conditions. In 1918 he was sent to the town of Volokholamsk. In 1924 he was transferred to serve in the Church of St. Georg in the village of Yegoria of Volokholamsk district. Then in 1929 to the Church of St. Nicholas, the Miracle Maker in the village of Likhachovo of Moscow region, and in 1931 to the Church of St. Nicholas, the Miracle Maker in the village of Fedoskino of Dmitrov district. In May 1937, Father Nikolai was transferred to the last place of his service, to the village of Mikhailovskaya of Ruza district of Moscow region, where he became a prior of the Church of Michael the Archangel. By this time, Father Nikolai was already ordained an archpriest. Archpriest Nicholas didn't serve in the Church of Michael the Archangel for long, only for 5 months. By that time the priest had already been widowed. In November 1937 he was arrested. In an unsent letter dated the 27th of October 1937 he wrote, "Now I live alone with God like a man." Father Nicholas was a model of a non-possessive shepherd. He never had any property, and in the last place of his service he lived in a parish house. In the same letter he writes with warmth and respect about relations with his new flock. "The parish church council cares about me very much." From the protocols of interrogation of witnesses, it's also clearly seen that the selfless service of Father Nikolai attracted many people to church. In a short time, the new prior managed to win the love and respect of the parishioners that especially irritated the authorities. So, in 1937, people's faith was still strong. Orthodox traditions were strong, and despite the persecution, the people reached for the church and for Father Nikolai. One of the witnesses testified, during religious holidays, Vinogradsky gathers crowded meetings of believers in the church, delaying the people for whole days and disrupting field work. Almost all of the interrogation protocols of the repressed in 1937 were written as if they were copied. Agitation against collective farms, disruption of all party and government events, protests against the discrimination of believers, which was also considered as anti-Soviet agitation. However, probably the biggest fault before the Soviet government was precisely their service to God and to the Church. Priests were declared a class-aligned element and were subject to destruction. They had no place in the bright kingdom of socialism. According to prosecution witnesses, Father Nikolai said, "People have forgotten God, and God has given people the power that they deserve. Something can be changed in this world only by repentance. You didn't want to be the slavers of God. You became slavers of Soviet authorities, which rob you using collective funds. Watch and pray, so that you will not fall into temptation." During interrogation, the investigator demanded to name the people with whom Father Nikolai answered, "I don't have a contact with anymore." People. He didn't admit the charge of counter-revolutionary activity. But the NKVD Troika, on the 5th of December 1937, Archpriest Nikolai Vinogradsky was sentenced to capital punishment for counter-revolutionary agitation. The priest was shot on the 15th of December 1937 at the Butova ground near Moscow and was buried in an unknown common grave. The church of Mikhail the Archangel was closed after the arrest of Father Nikolai, was damaged in 1941 and then was made out. Only 2 tiers of the church bell tower still exist. On the 27th of July 1989, the priest was rehabilitated by the prosecutor's office of Moscow region. In August 2000, Archpriest Nikolai Vinogradsky was canonized by the Anniversary Bishops' Council of the Russian Orthodox Church. Holy Martyr Ivan Derzhavin was born on the 25th of May 1873 in the village of Anufrievo in the Nikolsky county of Ruza district of Moscow province in the family of psalmist Nikolai Derzhavin. In 1894, Ivan Nikolaevich finished Kolomenskaya Theological College and in 1901 graduated from the Moscow Theological Seminary and was appointed a teacher of a parish school at the Church of the Nativity of the Mother of God in the village of Vikharevo of Serpukhov County. From 1902 to 1904, he was a teacher and teacher of the Law of God at Gorshkovo Parish School of Guslitsky district of Bogorodsky County. Ivan Nikolaevich married Pelageya Petrovna. Later, the couple had 9 children. On the 7th of August 1904, Trifon Turkestanov, the Bishop of Dmitrov, the Vicar of the Moscow Diocese, ordained Ivan Nikolaevich to the priesthood at the Church of Nicholas the Miracle Maker in the village of Miletus of Bogorodsk County, later Balashikha district. From that time and until 1918, he became a teacher of the Law of God at the Miletus Zemsky Primary School. For all of priestly duties and for the diligent preaching of the Word of God by His Eminence Vladimir, Metropolitan of Moscow and Kolomna, Father John was awarded a waistcloth in 1911. In the report of the deanery, it was noted that Father Ivan Derzhavin differed by a meek and kind character and enjoyed the love of his parishioners. In 1915, for his zeal for enlightening pastoral activities, His Eminence Makar Nevsky, Metropolitan of Moscow and Kolomna, he was awarded a schoolfare in 1918. Father John was awarded a Kamilavka for pastoral works by His Eminence Joseph, Archbishop of Kolomna and Mazhaisk. The church in the village of Miletus was built in a manor owned by the princes Golitsyn and Uchtomsky. The parish was small, and with the beginning of the persecution of the Russian Orthodox Church and the decline of faith, it became nearly empty. Father Ioan was humble, meek and gentle. His family lived in poverty. That is why they sold everything that could be sold, but the priest didn't leave the parish. In 1929, the persecution of the Russian Orthodox Church intensified. The authorities began to search for false witnesses and interrogate them. In December 1929, one of the false witnesses testified. Priest Ivan Nikolaevich Dzhavin gave sermons in which he said that the Soviet government is a godless power. It's necessary to fight against godless people, despite all their hardships. You will get a reward for this. The time will come and there will be no such violence against faith. Dzhavin didn't preach for about 6 months, and I don't remember the date when he spoke, but he personally told me that now it's impossible to preach, so we need to walk slowly among peasants, and this will bring more benefit. Did Dzhavin speak with you or with anyone else against the government? The investigator asked. I don't remember exactly. In a conversation with me, he said, the Soviet government has taxed heavily. Religion is being oppressed. The authorities have oppressed everyone with overwhelming taxes. The manufacturers were robbed, so were merchants. Now they will do the same with peasants. The clergy are being oppressed by the authorities. I am personally driven out of the house. Under this power, we have come to the point that there is nothing. This is how God is punishing for our godlessness. Another false witness said that the priest delivered sermons in which he called to fight for the strengthening of religion. They pointed out. Now, under the Soviet authorities, children are not taught the law of God at schools and must be taught at home. He also called on citizens to help the church to raise money among believers. He said, thanks to those citizens who haven't forgotten God and are visiting the church, God will help them for this. Now many atheists have appeared. They have forgotten God. Life has become bad. The church is falling apart. There's nothing now. God will punish us for this. Based on these testimonies, on the 3rd of February 1930, the OGPU officers arrested the priest and he was imprisoned in Butyrka in Moscow. The next day, answering the investigators' questions, Father Ioan said, I have never conducted any anti-Soviet agitation anywhere. I have not preached sermons for about a year by this moment. I used to preach sermons often, but they were exclusively religious, and there was nothing anti-Soviet in my words. In private conversations, I avoid talking on political topics. With parishioners, I only communicate on purely church matters. By this, the criminal case was completed. On the 22nd of March 1930, the OGPU Troika sentenced the priest to 3 years of exile in the Northern Territory for counter-revolutionary activities. In the verdict of the Troika, a recommendation was given to refuse all applications for mitigation of his fate. Returning from exile, Father Ivan was sent to serve to the church in the village of Ilinsk, Smolensk region, where he served until early February 1935. On the 12th of February 1935, he was appointed to serve at a church in the village of Nova Alexandrovka of Shakhovo district of Moscow region, and on the 5th of March 1937 he was appointed to the Trinity Church in the village of Kamenka of Noginsk district. Now it's the town of Elektrogali of Noginsk district. He lived with his family in the village of Milet, Reutovsky district. For selfless and impeccable service, Father Ivan was ordained an archpriest and awarded with a cross with ornaments. On the 29th of November 1937, Father Ivan was arrested and imprisoned in the town of Noginsk. In a denunciation it was written that the priest said that believers began to forget God and didn't go to churches, that the Soviet authorities brutally persecuted faith and believers, put innocent people in prisons. It was written that the priest called in the churchyard, "Orthodox people, take yourself together. You have forgotten faith and God. You go to church too little and you listen to these antichrist communists more. It's time for you to take up the mind." Father Ivan was accused of active counter-revolutionary activity, but the priest didn't plead guilty. The inquest heard that in August you terrified believers with counter-revolutionary slander in order to attract them to church and create dissatisfaction among believers with the Soviet authorities. Do you accept this? The investigator asked. "I have never terrified believers in order to attract them to the church and create dissatisfaction with the Soviet authorities," answered the priest. On the 3rd of December 1937, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region, according to Article 58, paragraph 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia for active counter-revolutionary slanderous agitation, sentenced Father Ivan to death penalty. Archpriest Ivan Derzhavin was executed on the 15th of December 1937 at the Butovo firing range and was buried there in an unknown grave. On the 30th of June 1989, Archpriest Ivan Derzhavin was rehabilitated by the prosecutor's office of Moscow region, and in August 2000 he was canonized by the Bishops' Council of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Holy Martyr Grigory was born on the 26th of January in 1875 in the village of Nikolskaya of Oreshkova Volosty of Ruza County of Moscow Province, in the family of psalmist Alexander Voynov. Graduating from the Bethany Ecclesiastical Seminary, he became a teacher at parish school at the Church of the Icon of the Mother of God of Kazan at Kalushsky Vorota. Then he married and the couple had 6 children. In 1900, Grigory Alexandrovich was inducted into a church office at the Church of the Holy Trinity in Toplistan village, where he served until 1931. In 1907, he was awarded with a waistcloth, in 1912 with a skufia, while in 1916 with a coif. In 1922, during the ejectment of church values, Father Grigory objected against the ejectment of the silver cross that had been given to the church in the 17th century. The same day, the ejection committee commissioner reported to the local police department, writing, "During the ejection of church values from the Trinity Church, in response to my words that these values would help the starving, the priest, in the presence of people, began anti-Soviet agitation, saying that gold and silver will be melted into cigarette cases. I ask you to take measures towards him." On the authority of that message, on the 6th of May in 1922, the head of the local police department ordered to arrest a priest. The same day, Father Grigory was arrested and questioned on the 16th of May. The priest answered to the investigator, "During the ejectment we were taken away a silver cross. It was about 300 years old. I asked to leave it to us, as it would likely to be remelted into a cigar case in America or somewhere else, but for us it is quite valuable. I didn't agitate it against ejectment at all." The case was referred to court-martial, which sentenced Father Grigory to 3 years of imprisonment. Then the case was transferred to the Revolutionary Tribunal. During the process in November and December, Father Grigory refused to confess his guilt, repeating the testify given during the preliminary investigation. He was set free by the authorities in 7 months. In 1924, Father Grigory was awarded with the Pectoral Cross, becoming an archpriest in 1928. In June 1931, Archpriest Grigory was transferred to the Church of Michael the Archangel in Kubenka village of Zvenigrad district. But on the 27th of November in 1937, Father Grigory was arrested and imprisoned in Taganka prison in Moscow. He was committed of anti-Soviet agitation again. Late at night on the 29th of November, the investigator questioned the priest, who denied his guilt again. On the 3rd of December, the NKVD Troika sentenced him to an execution. Archpriest Grigory Voynov was executed on the 8th of December in 1937 and buried in the unknown Pope's grave on Butov Iron Range ground near Moscow. On the 22nd of February 2001, Archpriest Grigory Voynov was canonized by the decree of the Holy Synod as a new Martyr and Confessor of Russia. Holy Martyr Alexei Veselovsky was born on the 15th of February 1873 in the village of Gubino of Mozhaisk County of Moscow region to the family of psalmist Alexander Veselovsky. In 1887, Alexei finished the Spiritual College of Pererva, and in 1894, after graduating from the Bethany Spiritual Seminary, he worked as a teacher at a public school. Alexei Alexandrovich married maiden Alexandra Petrovna Serena. On the 7th of May 1907, son Constantine was born to a young family. On the 11th of November, daughter Tatiana was born, while on the 8th of January 1910, daughter Nina. In 1908, Alexei Alexandrovich was ordained a priest to the Church of the Presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary in the village of Klementievo of Ruza County of Moscow Province, where he served until 1911. Then, for the next 26 years, from 1911 to 1937, Father Alexei served at the Church of the Nativity of Our Lady in the village of Staraya Ruza of Ruza district of Moscow region. The firm faith and jealousy of Father Alexei were the reasons of persecution by godless authorities. In the 1920s, the priest was both deprived of civil rights and dispossessed, while in 1930 Father Alexei was arrested and exiled from Ruza district. The details of the first arrest are not known. In 2 years he returned to the village of Staraya Ruza and continued to serve at his old place. By the moment of the first arrest, the priest lived alone. His wife died in 1911. while his 3 children were already adults and lived with their own families apart from him. His son worked in the village of Tuchkova, while his daughters worked in Moscow. Father Alexei devoted his life to serving to the church. Despite the threat of new repressions and weakening health, he continued preaching, but the details of his spiritual life are unknown. In such cases, the hagiographers analyze the statements of the persecutors, trying to restore the spiritual image of the confessor step by step using the interrogation records, the Acts of Martyrdom. On the 29th of November 1937, when the priest was arrested for the second time, the head of the village council made up a characteristic for the NKVD offices in which he wrote, Veselovsky Alexei Alexandrovich was a worshipper both before and after the revolution, being a priest even by the present day. In other words, Father Alexei was guilty for the fact that he did not deny God and did not leave the position of the priest. Those things alone were considered to be a crime for godless authorities. In the indictment it was written that Veselovsky Alexei Alexandrovich organized counter-revolutionary agitation among the collective villages, aiming to disrupt all the events of the party and Soviet government. But what events of the party and the government could the priest disrupt? Only the events connected to the struggle with religion, as those events were truly crucial in the politics of godless authorities. The existence of faithful people as well as clergy and laics were severely hated by those who had destruction as the main idea of life, who was heading to the religion of the future, choosing the bloody way. The ascetic priest could not see peasants who had recently been the most godly part of the nation being taken to collective farming by force, separating them from the liturgies, making them work on Sundays and holidays, and totally controlling their private life. In the interrogation records, the words of Father Alexei that working on holidays is a sin were considered as counter-revolutionary agitation, like the following statements. Why are you working on collective farms? You will earn nothing, while if you earn something, you will be dispossessed by the government. A peasant has been totally dispossessed by the Soviet authorities, so people have nothing for a living. You are working on collective farms. You are not allowed to go to church. If you had not worked on collective farms, nobody would have forbidden you to go to the church. Father Alexei clearly understood that it was a process of focused spiritual degradation of peasants, and he could not keep silence in the situation, as the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. During the interrogation, Father Alexei named nobody and did not plead any guilt. On the 5th of December 1937, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region of USSR sentenced Father Alexei Veselovsky to death penalty. On the 11th of December 1937, Archpriest Alexei accepted his martyrdom, being executed on Butovo firing range area and being buried in the unmarked mass grave. Holy Martyr Alexei was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia by the Council of Archbishops of the Russian Orthodox Church in 2000.
Holy Martyr Constantine was born on the 23rd of November 1879 in the village of Pesochny Zavod of Zhyzdrinsk County of Kaluga province to the family of priests of the Church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary, George Nemeshaev. It is known that 6 children were born to the Nemeshaevs. Following his father's footsteps, in 1895 Konstantin Georgievich finished Missionary Spiritual College on the 2nd class, and entered Kaluga Spiritual Seminary that he graduated from in 1901 on the 1st class. He returned home and was appointed to the Church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary of his native village. In 1902, Psalmist Konstantin Nemeshaev was appointed to the Church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary of the village of Bukchino of Zhyzdrinsk County of Kaluga province. Here, the young man married maiden Lydia Vasilyevna, and on the 2nd of December was appointed a priest. 4 children were born to the family of Father Constantine. Until 1930, the priest probably served at one of the churches of the town of Kirov of Kaluga region, either the Cathedral of St. Alexander Nevsky or the Church of the Nativity of Virgin Mary. There he faced the revolution and overcame all the deprivations of the 30 years. Father Constantine was arrested several times.
in 1921 and in 1930. The second arrest ended up with the confiscation of all his property. As a result, the priest along with his family had to move to one of the villages of Ruza district of Moscow region. In the investigation protocols, the village was written down as Vedeni. Taking into consideration the level of literacy of many OGPU or NKVD investigators in that period, the village could have been Vedenskoye Klementiev that was included in the newly created Možaisk district in July 1929. The village of Vedeni might also have been the village of Vederniki, while priest Konstantin Nemishaev might have served at the church of St. Nicholas the Miracle Maker in Lushki churchyard that was relatively near it, where by the beginning of 1930 priest Ion Troitsky and deacon Nikolai Shatalov, who had been serving there, had been arrested. On his new place of service, Father Konstantin was still chased by the OGPU. The criminal case of the priest was opened, while a search was made, but no evidence was found. The same year, in 1930, the Nemishaevs moved to the village of Dedinovo of Lukhovitsy district of Moscow region, where Father Konstantin became the last prior of the Church of the Life-Giving Trinity during the Soviet period. In the archives, the application of priest Konstantin Nemishaev to Moscow Cultural Commission has been saved. Dated the 25th of January 1934 and connected with logging, it described the hardships of life in details. I am already 54. I have nothing, neither house nor land, meadows or cattle. I have no money to hire anyone, while I have no physical opportunity to prepare 73.5 cube meters of logging in such a short time. There is nobody to replace me as a priest. And such a spiritual shepherd as Father Konstantin could not avoid being arrested during the next wave of repressions of 1937-1938, as even those years the Trinity Church was full of people. Priest Konstantin Nemishaev was arrested on the 6th of November 1937, being accused in active counter-revolutionary agitation and imprisoned in Kolomna. During the interrogations, the priest did not plead guilty. On the 17th of November, according to the 58th article, paragraph 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia, the NKVD Troika of Moscow region sentenced the priest to capital punishment. Priest Konstantin Nemishaev was executed on the 21st of November 1937 on Butva firing range area near Moscow and buried in an unmarked mass grave. On the 27th of June 1989, Konstantin Georgievich Nemishaev was rehabilitated by the Prosecutor's Office of Moscow region, while on the 20th of August 2000, Holy Martyr Konstantin was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia. We're at the Church of St. Dimitrios in the town of Ruza,
where Martyr Pavel Sokolov served. Martyr Pavel Sokolov was born on the 3rd of March 1892 in the county town of Ruza, Moscow province. His father Sergei Gavrilovich served as a psalmist at the Church of Great Martyr Dimitrios of Thessalonica, and his mother Ekaterina Stepanovna was raising up 5 children. In 1912, Sergei Gavrilovich Sokolov became a deacon, and in 1917 he was ordained a priest and served to a ripe old age. According to the NKVD questionnaire, in 1938, at the age of 75, Father Sergius was still serving in the village of Dubrova of Ruza district. Both brothers of Pavel Sergeyevich, Senior Alexander and Junior Nikolai, in different years graduated from the Bethany Theological Seminary. Pavel Sokolov himself finished Volokholamsk Spiritual College and in August 1906 also entered Bethany Spiritual Seminary, where he studied until May 1914. In March 1914, along with other students of the 6th grade, he was blessed to wear a Sticharion. At the end of the seminary course, he declared his desire to serve in the ecclesiastical department. I will have residence in the house of my parent, the deacon of the Dmitrov Church of the town of Ruza, Sergei Sokolov. During the Civil War, psalmist Pavel Sokolov was mobilized to Ray militia, being demobilized shortly after, and he continued to live in the town of Ruza. There he served as a psalmist until he was arrested in 1938, bearing all the hardships of a servant of the persecuted church, poverty, extortion, persecution by the authorities. Pavel Sokolov obeyed, even though he was blind in one eye. According to the NKVD questionnaire in 1934, Pavel Sokolov was deprived of voting rights by the Presidium of the Council of the town of Ruza and restored to civil rights only after the constitution was approved in 1937. Meanwhile, from 1924 to 1937, Pavel Sergeyevich was taxed with a firm task on meat and milk delivery. Pavel Sokolov was arrested on the 10th of February 1938 on charges of conducting active counter-revolutionary agitation and was imprisoned in the Ruza district police station. In the detention order it was pointed out, being alien to the Soviet authorities and party, he systematically agitated among the population in anti-Soviet way, trying to disrupt the arranged events. Speaking among the faithful about the elections to the Supreme Soviet, Sokolov declared, "According to the new law, even clergymen can be elected, so we need to nominate our priest as a candidate to the Supreme Soviet, while we, the faithful, should agitate among population not to vote for communists." Moreover, among collective farmers he agitates against kolkhoz, saying, "No matter how long you work on collective farms, nothing will work. While no matter how good is the harvest, the authorities will take everything from you. You'll live worse on collective farms than during the serfdom. A peasant will live badly until Soviet authorities exist. If you want to live better, you need to eliminate these authorities." In the indictment of psalmist Pavel Sokolov it was written, in October 1937, being in the town council of Ruza, he said to the clerk of the town council Alexeyev, "What a life we have now! We are knuckled under Soviet authorities. It is impossible to live. Despite the church is separated from the state, it is heavily taxed anyway. The church became more poor. That is why not many faithful go to it. Early church income was bigger. We lived much better than during the Soviet regime." Being questioned as an indicted, Sokolov Pavel Sergeyevich categorically denied the charge of counter-revolutionary agitation. By a decision of the NKVD Troika on the 16th of February 1938, Pavel Sokolov was sentenced to death by firing squad. Psalmist Pavel Sokolov was executed on the 26th of February 1938 on Butva firing range area near Moscow and was buried in an unmarked mass grave. In August 2000, Martyr Pavel Sokolov was canonized by the Archbishop Council of the Russian Orthodox Church.
Martyr Alexei Skarbekatov was born in 1889 in the village of Srednyakova of Solnechnogorsky county of Moscow province to a peasant's family. His father, Semyon Skarbekatov, worked as a gardener and, according to some sources, served as a diacon. After finishing the second-grade teacher school, Alexei Semyonovich worked as a teacher at a parish school in the village of Vorontsova of Russky County. In 1989, he passed an external exam, getting a pedagogical education, and was appointed to the Asherina Parish School, where he worked from 1910 to 1911. Then Alexei Semyonovich was transferred to the Alexina School of the village of Alexina in Russky County, where he taught until 1915. From there he was conscripted for military service, and during First World War, from 1915 to 1918, served in the army with the rank of sub-lieutenant. From 1918 until April 1921, Alexei Semyonovich was in the Red Army at the headquarters of the 15th Rifle Izinsky Division, as a corpsist, then as a clerk. Later, he was appointed junior assistant to the Division Chief of Staff for Economic Affairs. After demobilization in 1921, Alexei Semyonovich lived in Russky district of Moscow region. Alexei Semyonovich was married to Natalia Sergeyevna Kolobeva, and they had 3 children. Valentina was born in 1922, Anna in 1926, and their son Ivan was born in 1929. Very little is known about the further fate of Alexei Semyonovich after 1921. From 1921 to 1923, he served as a psalmist at the Church of Asherina. In the late 1920s, during collectivization, his house, horse and car were taken from him. Since 1935, Alexei Semyonovich moved to the village of Ivanovo in Russky district of Moscow region. There he worked as the head of Ivanovo school. Alexei Semyonovich was arrested on the 22nd of January 1938 on charges of conducting active counter-revolutionary agitation and was held in custody in Butyrskaya prison in Moscow. By NKVD Troika on the 8th of March 1938, Alexei Skarbogatov was sentenced to death by firing squad. The sentence was carried out on the 5th of April 1938. A prospective place of burial of the martyr Alexius is Butovo firing range area near Moscow. In 2000, Alexei Semyonovich Skarbogatov was canonized as a new martyr and a confessor of Russia.
Martyr Nikifor was born on the 23rd of March in the village of Popki of Ruza county of Moscow province to a peasants' family of Peter Konstantinovich and Marfa Sezonovna Zaitsevs. Finishing a village school, Nikifor wanted to be an educated person from his childhood and was rather intelligent. As he was hard-working, he had a good household, that during the Soviet period became the reason of many hardships. During the First World War, Nikifor Petrovich was mobilized to the army, but as he was middle-aged, he was appointed to serve on unit transport. Returning home, Nikifor Petrovich continued to run peasants' household. As a faithful man and permanent parishioner of the Church of the Resurrection of Christ in the village of Ivoilova, he was a member of the church council. He sang in choir, was a constant participant of cross processions and public prayers, summoning his fellow villagers to pray God and go to church without paying attention on persecutions. The people who knew Nikifor Petrovich said that he was a deeply faithful and helpful person who was against lechery. During mass collectivization, despite being against the way it was held, Nikifor Petrovich finally entered the kolkhoz. He used to measure work throughout a long peasant's day and didn't accept the demand when, in case of impossibility to complete something quickly, people began to work for show. Erstwhile, when the head of the village council began to hurry him and even showed how to reap wheat faster, Nikifor Petrovich, as an experienced and measured man, answered him sedately, "You worked like that just now, while I have to work this way for the whole day, and I am not able to do it." In kolkhoz he never began his work without prayer, and party authorities didn't like this. The persecutions of the year 1937 started, and again, like in 1930, peasants began to be eliminated, and any reason for the arrest and conviction was used. Nikifor Petrovich was faithful, and that was enough for his arrest. On the 23rd of September 1937 he was arrested and imprisoned in the town of Volokоламsk. As witnesses, the head and the secretary of the village council as well as one of the collective farmers were questioned. They said that Nikifor Zaitsev, speaking about the execution of Tukhachevsky and others, said that they had been executed in vain. Look at that period, brothers shoot each other. When in the summer of 1937, during the meeting, people who hindered others from work on collective farms were being discussed, Zaitsev stood up and shouted, "You rob in working, and try to prove something." Then he went away, banging the door. Zaitsev is against loans. Zaitsev is a religious mad who always takes care about the renovation of the church. While at home during religious holidays, he has public prayers and sings chants. During Easter religious holiday, he tried to persuade collective farmers to organize cross procession with icons, telling them that under color of new constitution it is allowed to do it. This year, during the discussion of the topic of anti-religious propaganda, Zaitsev declared, "The Holy Writ is the very truth, while the rest is the lie of Antichrist." Zaitsev sings in a church choir. In his house, Zaitsev has made an icon stand, and every evening sings chants before the icons, singing so loudly that the whole street hears. During the collective work, Zaitsev showed himself as a loafer who seldom goes to work, and when he comes, he sings prayers most of the time. Zaitsev is a religious mad, and a thirst solicitor on church issues. He tells collective farmers that it is needed to believe only in gospel, while the rest, including collective farms, is the deeds of Antichrist. Zaitsev never signs any state loans declaring that he is against help to Antichrist. He calls state supplies a robbery. During the interrogation, the investigator questioned Nikifor Petrovich. According to the materials of the investigation case, you have a close contact with a clergyman who often visits you at your place. During these meetings, you discuss political issues. Give your testimony on this topic. The priest truly visits me at my place. He comes during religious holidays, organizing a public prayer. After, I make tea for him. I had talks with the priest about harvesting, while I never had any political conversations with him. According to the materials of the investigation case, you are doing counter-revolutionary and anti-Soviet agitation among your fellow villagers. Give your testimony on this topic. I have never done any counter-revolutionary and anti-Soviet agitation. According to the materials of the investigation case, in June 1937, during the discussion of the government decree about the exemptions of collective farmers on wheat supplies, you spoke with flagitious counter-revolutionary slander on the party and government, claiming that this decree is a deception of collective farmers. Give your testimony on this topic. I did not say these words. People said this about me, as now in the Soviet Union the majority are slanders, and slander others for nothing. In my opinion, such evil spread because there is no Christian faith, and the young generation is not taught with Christian moral values. According to the materials of the investigation case, you supported famous counter-revolutionary leaders in your conversations with collective farmers. Give your testimony on this topic. In my firm belief, these people were clever but did bad things, and instead of agitation of their own ideas, they betrayed. If they had not betrayed, but defended their ideas, I would have welcomed them. I also do not agree that they were executed, as I consider it to be a cruel punishment. According to the materials on the investigation case, you agitate against collective farms, calling them Antichrist deeds. Give your testimony on this topic. Collective farms are good enough, but people are not ready for public works. That is why there is no consistency in work. As far back during the collectivization, I offered not to hurry with creating a kolkhoz, but firstly to create trial collective farms for people to show the advantages, and then to create collective farms in large numbers. According to the materials of the investigation case, you petitioned to allow the priests to go to people's houses with icons during Easter religious holiday, and you persuaded collective farmers to do it. Give your testimony on this topic. The priest explained me that now, according to the Constitution, we have rights to organize cross-processions with icons without any permission of local authorities. The priest went across the village with the gospel and the cross. He showed me a book and said, "Just in case, I have the Constitution with me in order when the members of the village council begin to carp with me, I will show them the column where it is allowed to perform these rites." Apart from you, who has the same opinion in your village? My wife Maria Ignatievna has the same opinion. A priest often visits me and we have conversations on religious topics. I was the member of a church council and sang in a church choir. What are the subjects of your discussions with a priest? We talk only on religious issues. That was the end of the investigation, and Nikifor Petrovich was transferred to Taganka prison in Moscow. On the 11th of November 1937, the NKVD Troika sentenced him to 8 years of imprisonment in a labor camp, and he was sent to the station of Medvedya Gora in Belbaltlag. When the Second World War began, on the 28th of July 1941, Nikifor Petrovich was transferred to Kargopol Lag in Arkhangelsk region. In the camp, he had to weave fishing nets. Nikifor Petrovich Zaitsev passed away on the 21st of May 1942 in Kargopol Lag and was buried in the unmarked grave. On the 26th of December 2006, by the decree of Holy Synod, Martyr Nikifor Zaitsev was canonized as a new martyr and confessor of Russia. Martyr Alexei Losev was born in 1869 in the village of Yablonovo of Zadonsk County, Voronezh Province, to a peasant's family. According to the NKVD protocols, Alexei Yegorovich was of kulak and merchant origin and was illiterate. In 1938, according to the information, Alexei Yegorovich was a prayer poster at the Church of the Dormition of Mother of God in the village of Katina of Ruza district of Moscow region and was a member of a parish council. Before the arrest, Alexei Yegorovich was a vegetable seller, also being an invalid of the third group. On the 3rd of March 1938, the NKVD officers arrested Alexei Yegorovich Losev, accusing him in systematic counter-revolutionary agitation against Soviet authorities and the party. The Church of the Dormition of Mother of God was closed, while the church property was stolen and demolished. On the 11th of March of the same year, according to the 58th article, paragraph 10 of the Criminal Code of Russia, Alexei Yegorovich Losev was sentenced to death penalty. On the 20th of March 1938, Alexei Yegorovich Losev was executed on Butovo firing range area near Moscow and was buried in the unmarked mass grave. In 1989, Alexei Yegorovich Losev was rehabilitated. Blessed Alexandra was born approximately in 1885 in the village of Oglin of Ruza County of Moscow Province to a poor peasant's family. The girl's father passed away when she was about 8, while several years later her mother also died. Her mother's childless sister Mavra took the orphan to her place, and Sashenka began to live with her aunt in the village of Safoniha. They lived in poverty with almost nothing to wear. Sashenka did not go to school, but learned how to read herself, being able to read both in Russian and in Old Slavonic. Since childhood, the girl enjoyed reading books on spiritual issues. She neither played nor ran across the village with other children. She preferred to read most of her time. By the age of 16, spiritual world gradually began to open to Sashenka. That time, the Spirit of God performed wonders through her, healing people both from moral vices and physical illnesses. Both paralyzed and obsessed people were brought to Blessed Alexandra, and all of them went back healed. The Blessed prayed to God about curing ill people, watered them with holy water, read catechist hymns, and miracles of healing were made after her prayers. People who were brought to her on hand-barrows left her on their own. Maria Yefimovna recollected the following. She cured all diseases in this way. She gave children a pat on their heads, washed them with holy water, and the child was nice. Moreover, people said about Sashenka that she could foresee the needs of people that were about to come to her, either with presents or their thirsts or troubles. It was the time when people understood that Sashenka was an unusual person blessed by God. Both in winter and in summer, she walked wearing a linen shirt with a small jacket over it and a headscarf. Even during strongest frosts, she never wore stockings, wearing felt boots on bare feet. She was of medium height, with short fair hair and a nice face. The Blessed, along with her aunt, went to church every Sunday. They went either to Yurkina, Anufriva, or Petrova. In 1917,
After the October Revolution, someone denounced Sashenka. She was accused in witchcraft and godliness at the same time. The Blessed was arrested and imprisoned in Ruza, where she was starved and sometimes given herring with no water. Sashenka refused to accept such food, but continued to be cheerful and wealthy. People said that when an inspector from Moscow came to talk to the Blessed, she told him about his life and the reasons of his problems. He ordered to let Sashenka free and left back to Moscow. Sometime after her release, the Blessed suddenly passed away. She complained nobody about nothing and was not ill. As people said, it happened in the end of 1917 or in 1918. Sasha foretold her own death soon after the revolution. She came to the church in the village of Anufrieva, bringing a spade with her and dug it into the ground, saying, "I do not want to live during this new regime." Sasha's funeral was unusual. There were so many people that when a coffin with the body of the Blessed was brought to the village of Anufrieva, accompanied with bell ringing, the end of the line was still in the village of Safonica. Many priests came to burial service as the clergy respected Sashenka. The coffin was carried opened so all people could see the Blessed for the last time. The coffin was carried only by maidens, who lately said that it was unusually light, not heavier than to lift a spoon up. During the Great Patriotic War, when our troops retreated, the church in the village of Anufrieva was blown up. Sashenka's grave was also threatened with destruction, but after the explosion, the burial place remained unharmed. In 1996, reburial of the Blessed Alexandra took place in the village of Dana of Istra district of Moscow region, near the altar of the Church of the Exaltation of Holy Cross of God.
We were born to be with Jesus glorified, and their enemy has not erased us from the earth. With hook and stars we were already crucified. For us forever banner will be cross. By kissing cross we gave an oath to Lord. Betrayal was the sin of Russian nation, and now we are scattered on the earth, and like the chosen face the relegation. We know persecutions, prisons, grave, by narrow roads we are led to Christ, but we are Russians, we should firmly say, if we repent from knees then we will rise. And angels to the final battle call the nation, for faith in Christ without any fear. With only prayer, people's recantation, by omnipotent Lord, Rus will be risen.
The persecutions of the Russian Church by Soviet authorities were so cruel that not just to tell about your faith, but even to follow it was a defeat. Canonized new Martyrs and Confessors denied nothing. They believed, prayed, and like a lamb went to their own Calvary. They died not on the battlefields, but in prisons, not with witnesses, but secretly. Nobody saw, knew, heard about their feet. Even there was no hope that their verity would ever exalt. Not long before his arrest, Metropolitan Serafim Chichagov said, "The Orthodox Church now is having the times of troubles. Those who remain loyal to the Holy Church of Apostles will be saved. Now many people leave the Church because of the persecutions. Other people even betrayed. However, from the history it is clear that earlier there were persecutions, but all of them ended in the exaltancy of Christianity. The same will happen after these persecutions. They will end, and the orthodoxy will exalt again. Now many people suffer for faith, but they are the gold that is purified in the hearth of spiritual troubles. After, there will be so many holy martyrs suffered for the faith of Christ that there has never been in the history of Christianity before. Not all the names of them are known to us. That is why, in a church, during the prayer, we often hear the following words: "Their names, O God, Thee know."
Those nuggets of information that have been saved. Let us see new martyrs as many-sided and strong personalities. Their lives and spiritual feat can hardly be underestimated.
analyzing deeper the historical events which these shepherds were led through by the providence of God, their confession of true faith becomes vivid. Without any doubts, they were sent like sheep in the midst of wolves, and were delivered over in courts for the sake of Christ. Now we, as the successors of the feet of new martyrs, confessors, and all who suffered for the faith of Christ, need to understand and believe that the words of the commandment of Christ fulfilled in them. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you, because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven.